across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Hot, hot, hot out there, isn't it? I think it's going to hit something like 37, 38 degrees here in the capital. I'm certainly feeling it. I hope you're staying cool wherever you are. Stay hydrated, ladies and gentlemen. The most important thing when it's lovely and summery like it is today. I'm not complaining, though. Can we stop moaning about the weather? And please, can we learn to operate trains? I mean, for crying out loud, I've lived, across the developing world where today's weather is just an average winter's day and they seem to function with infrastructure, well, give or take. But can we just get a grip in this country? It's a bit hot. Yes, wear fewer clothes, drink more water, stay in the shade, put on the sunblock. Jobs are good un. You could learn that at age of 5. Anyway, lots to talk about today. It's been a busy old week of news as, well, the Labour Party seem to be absolutely unravelling now. They've given up. They don't want to announce any more plans or do anything because there's going to be this, coronation of Andy Burnham. But do we know what he stands for? No. Does he know what he stands for? No. And so what are they doing? They're letting out a load of prisoners. It's just falling apart, basically. I have a feeling the Burnham bounce is not going to last very long. It's not even really begun. So we're going to be discussing that. We're also going to be talking about the unprecedented decision by the royal family to start releasing a lot of information on their financial affairs, especially taxation, as we also learn that the royal family will not be resident in Buckingham Palace pretty much ever. Although I didn't think they had been for a long time, so I'm not really sure why that one has suddenly sent shockwaves around the UK newspapers. We're going to be talking about culture wars as well. So much to discuss, and, of course, the government's latest proposals to house more migrants on military bases. Is that a good idea? Well, it could be better than hotels if they weren't allowed to roam around free. Chicken wire fencing and all of that, right, that we normally have around military bases. Can we just secure that rather than put them on minibuses to go to primary schools and stare at girls? That might be common sense, but we don't have a lot of that knocking about, do we, in the United Kingdom? Right. If you want to get in touch with the show today, the number is 0344 499 1000. It is your normal network rate, of course. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed, if you'd rather leave me a little voice note on WhatsApp that I can play out to everybody and give myself a little minute of, it's a mini break, a little holiday, a vacay within my own show. 8722 is the number if you'd like to send a text message. You've got to write the word talk before you write the body of your message. If you're going to do that, it's all your normal network rate, etc. Housekeeping done. There you go. Let's get on with the show. First up is the brilliant Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. Good morning to you, Isabel.
Good morning. I'm glad that you're taking the heat wave in your stride. I would expect nothing less from a lady that's lived in, Ghana and Pakistan and goodness knows where else.
Exactly. This is a cold day. We're not really hot yet. I love it. I don't know why everyone moans about it. I mean, just, embrace it. It's brilliant. We moan when it's cold. We moan when it's rainy. We moan when it's cloudy. We moan when there's not enough rain. We moan when it's too hot. I think, infrastructure needs to get a grip. This whole idea that all of a sudden it's a bit like the Football World Cup with extra advertising where train drivers need special hydration breaks. Carry a bottle of water with you. It's not that difficult. It's also not that difficult, you would think, for a government to prioritise the safety of its people. And in doing so, perhaps announce they're going to build lots of new mega prisons and where they're going to be and how they're going to fast-track all of these planning applications to make sure that we have a greater prison estate. But no, instead, the Labour Party are going to be freeing waves of killers and rapists early. It was always going to be thus, wasn't it, when they started doing the early releases and we got the sort of generalised yobbos and shoplifters and low-time drug dealers, being picked up by their mates in their fancy cars with bottles of champagne. We knew what the end point was. Here we are. How reassuring.
Well, I'm really glad you brought this up because it's reminded me of something, which is that this was actually one of the very first things that Keir Starmer did in his ill-fated administration. He released a load of prisoners. Do you remember? It was literally like in the first few days of the Starmer regime after they won the election. And I thought, my God, this is setting a tone for something quite extraordinary here. And it kind of just went from there, didn't it? You know, releasing a certain type of prisoner, you know, rapists, you know, people who have assaulted, and paedophiles, if you're lucky, if they went to prison at all in the first place. And then a few weeks later came the Southport horrors, and he was busy locking up a different type of person, far-right thugs, supposedly. So it'll be very interesting to see, how does Andy Burnham square all of this? I mean, any prisoners being released early, he'll want that to happen pretty speedily before he's in charge, because it's a terrible look.
I just don't understand. You know, you would think they would counter this by telling us about what they're going to do in the long term to rectify this problem. We've still technically got 3 years at least of this government left. And it'd be great to know that rather than just randomly releasing prisoners because we don't have enough space, that we're actually going to build a lot more prisons. And yet that seems to be missing from their agenda. I have no doubt. Indeed, there must be plans afoot. But knowing this country, looking at projects such as HS2, when are we going to get these new prisons? Ever?
Well, I mean, all of this stuff is a nonsense, isn't it? And in the UK, I live near Campsfield, which is an immigration detention centre, so-called.
Detention, doing heavy lifting there.
Yeah, which has been renovated at the cost of umpteen squillions of pounds. And it's just currently incarcerating no more than a handful of detainees. Now, the whole site was... I mean, the whole thing cost a fortune. I didn't come to the show prepared with the exact figures, but it was many, many millions. In my mind, I'm thinking it was about 70 million, the renovation. And the cost per, I'm going to call it a bedroom, because it won't be a cell, will it? This is the UK talking about. It'll be a nice little bedroom. Was just astronomical, you know, the kind of amount you could buy a whole modern house for. And they just don't use the facilities they've got. And equally, my colleague and researcher Christian Drogan from Watchmen was wandering around in one of our great cities about a week or so ago, and chanced upon another Home Office detention facility which appeared to be completely empty. So we might look at that for talk next week. What exactly is going on in some of these facilities that the taxpayer has spent millions of pounds building, maintaining, and then no one's in it?
Do you know, it's absolutely staggering, and we don't hear about these stories enough. Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. One assumes it's because all these poor, precious, beatified inmates who have paid people traffickers and international criminal cartels lots of money to illegally break into the country, work in the black market, sexually assault women, poor little things, deserve to have hotels and deserve to have HMOs. They've got to have houses and kitchens and widescreen televisions and GP appointments and all the trimmings of Western society, rather than actually, I don't know, be told you're not allowed to be here. You shouldn't have come into the country without any sort of visa, without a passport. So here's a cell for you. I'd imagine that that's probably what's going on. I want to talk to you about this. You've got to laugh or cry. But essentially, there's a green paper called Watch This Space, a new strategic direction for UK media. And it wants to essentially force social media to give prominence to what they're calling trusted news outlets. Now, one assumes in this they want it to be people who receive bit of public service funding, essentially. The BBC, ITV, Channel 4, what we would call the legacy channels, which we know what's going on here, don't we? You've got a couple of channels that are doing very well, thank you very much, breaking record audience figures, who happen to position themselves more on the right wing of the debate, whereas the legacy channels, who have always enjoyed getting money from the licence fee, well, we know the groupthink that goes on within those institutions. This is, you know, come on. This is literally like watching a sort of banana republic decide the news that people must have.
Well, it comes in the same week that we hear that all papers, the government wants all newspapers to sign up to a state regulator. I mean, this is a big state, isn't it? It's what we all feared would happen when Labour won the election, what feels like a decade ago, but is actually only 2 years, tragically, people. We've got another 3 years of this, probably. And this is what they like to do. They like to monitor, they like to surveil, they like to control, they like to interfere, they like to tell us what to do. And, you know, with this particular one, Doubtless it will be designed to disadvantage platforms like Talk, which present a really alternative viewpoint to the BBC speak that they want everybody to be fed with. But I can't help feeling that it's a losing battle for them. You know, the media landscape is changing so rapidly. And I just think that this is very, very difficult now for any even a pseudo-democratic state to actually grip. You know, there's so many different channels now that are getting huge followings and don't rely on any handouts from anybody.
No, indeed. Basically, it's a Fabian society continuing their action plans. They wanted to create these regulators post-Levinson inquiry in the same way they wanted to bring digital ID. They're going to give it a push. They're going to try and get those things in before they get chucked out. And will they get chucked out? Well, will we have an early general election? Should we be having an early general election? Certainly, I think it's rather mystifying that 20,000 odd people could determine who leads the country, becomes Prime Minister based off zero manifesto or zero agenda for the 80 million of us who are going to be subject to Burnhamism. I certainly think it's the right thing to do, to coin their favourite term, but do you think that they are going to do it? Will there be enough of a Burnham bounce for him to think it's worth my while going to the polls, even if the Labour Party do end up losing some of their massive majority? One assumes that he may as well make hay while the sun shines.
Well, I don't think that's a safe assumption. I mean, if you mean that he should go for it sooner than later because it'll reduce the number of seats that they'll lose in 3 years' time, I don't think he's going to have the guts to do that. I'd love him to do that because I think the sooner people get a choice, the better. But I just don't think he'll take that risk. You know, a lot of Labour MPs would undoubtedly lose their seats. We know this. You know, even if there is a big Burnham bounce, a lot of Labour MPs are still going to lose to Reform. And is he really going to go down that route? You know, if you're Andy Burnham, you've got your sweet deal here. You know, looks like he's not even going to have to fight for the leadership. You know, he's taken his big risk, which was Makerfield. He could have lost that. He didn't. He did really well. He's taken his big gamble. He's now secure for 3 years, you know, barring some weird unexpected thing, which does seem to be happening quite a lot in politics. He is secure for 3 years. If I were him, I would not be taking that chance, you know, knowing that I was likely to be returning to the Commons with a smaller majority, even if that bought me an extra year or so, because, you know, he's got 3 years. So what's it going to buy him for? 4 to 5 years? Just don't think it's worth it for him. Doesn't mean he won't do it. I know there are people, you know, significant voices on the Labour side that privately think he should. But I think, as said to JK this morning, I think it's sort of 20% chance at best.
Do you know, it's interesting. I think that we Brits, we bite our tongues far too much. I think we should really push for this. It's getting rather farcical now that we've got our 7th Prime Minister in a decade. Boris Johnson did the correct thing when he actually called for a general election after that snap election. And I think that we should, you know, push back against the elites and say, you can't play these games with us anymore. It seems to me, frankly, no wonder they want to reward legacy channels for being pushed on social media, because it was largely the legacy channels who invented King of the North, who basically ran the campaign for him before he'd even picked Makerfield as a seat where he was going to try his luck, who decided that everyone else shouldn't stand against him in a leadership election. I mean, he's basically just been picked by Sky News and BBC News, hasn't he, Andy Burnham? You know, it's farcical. We live in a clown country now.
Well, as you're saying, we live in a clown country. For those that aren't watching this on YouTube or any of our other platforms, we're showing images of Andy Burnham standing between, on the one side, somebody called Count Binface, I think, you know, guy with a bin on his head in a silver robe. How do we even describe that?
Well, like Count Binface of Binlandia, we love him.
And then on Andy's right, as we see it on our screens, is a guy in a top-to-toe fox costume. Like he's got a fox head, and he's holding a thing saying protect British wildlife. What kind of flipping fucking circus has our country become that this is the moment, folks, this is the moment when however many people it was, 25,000 people, had a chance to elect Britain's next Prime Minister. And we're talking bin faces and foxes on either side of him. And then as Keir Starmer gave his resignation speech, we had some absolute clown on steroids at the end of Downing Street on Whitehall, blasting out Ode to Joy.
Yeah.
At some point, our country, getting serious now, at some point, our country has got to grow up with this stuff. I know democracy is a beautiful thing, and you know, if Foxman and Binface want to run for government, yeah, I probably prefer a situation in which they can do that. But whoever takes over the helm from Keir Starmer has got to get a grip of our country, because we currently look like complete and utter muppets on the world stage.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, blimmin' Andy Burnham looks like he was there receiving a hairdressing award or something with that sort of all black outfit and the black glasses. But no, you're absolutely right. We've just become a country that is focused on puerile, infantile, two-dimensional things. You know, no one talks about serious politics. Nobody's really quizzing Andy Burnham about what is your gender, what would you do? Even, look, Kemi Badenoch has a bit of wind in her sails every time she gets to do PMQs. But yeah, I don't really feel that she lands some blows and swaggers around the place and makes jokes about the Labour Party electing their first female Prime Minister because they don't seem to understand what a biological woman is. But this is what we've come down to now: sound bites, little gimmicks, TikTok videos. I'm totally with you. You kind of look at the landscape of UK politics and you wonder where the adults have gone.
Yeah, it's just all a bit kind of facile, isn't it? And maybe that doesn't matter if you're running a really well-oiled machine. If your country looks like it's in fine shape, you can afford this kind of nonsense. But we're not. We're in a complete and utter mess. And make no mistake, you know, I mean, as many of our listeners know, I'm based in the Middle East, and our allies here talk about this, not in tones of anger, but in tones of sadness. What is happening to the UK? And this goes right up to, you know, diplomatic level across the Gulf, with people sort of just despairing because they want Britain to be Great Britain. They really do. They still look up to us. And yet they worry about what's going on the streets of London in particular. That's what they hear about. They hear London is dangerous. We all know how many from the Middle East, wealthier people from the Middle East, actually leave the region here in these hot months and come to London and spend huge amounts of money. Well, increasingly, some of those people are saying, do you know what? It's actually not something I fancy. You know, I heard about that guy that got stabbed to death for his Rolex in Knightsbridge, and you know, maybe I'll go to Milan this time instead. You know, this is what we're up against reputationally, and of course strategically. You know, with the whole mess over the Chagos and our Keir Starmer's failure to invest in defence, on and on it goes. So, you know, maybe Foxman and Binface can have their day another time. At this point, we need to get a grip and look much more serious. By the way, Alex, just as an aside, I remember you mentioned a bit earlier in our conversation, you mentioned about ID cards. Here's a quirky fact for you. Did you know that Andy Burnham's first job in government as a very junior minister was to implement an ID card scheme? So he was to implement digital ID card of some sort. The whole thing was an absolute fiasco. And in the end, only 15,000 of Andy's ID cards were ever issued. And that was only on a voluntary basis, and the legislation had to be repealed. So I wonder whether he might actually be a little bit nervous of that one again.
Oh, gosh, he's probably the Fabian Society pick, isn't he, to push through all their agenda. One of my favourite facts is, do you know what job Andy Burnham did before he entered politics?
He was briefly on a newspaper, wasn't he?
I don't know. My understanding is nothing. I think he's only ever just been in politics, basically. Never lived in the real world.
I think he had a very brief stint on a newspaper. Obviously, we like journalists, but I don't think this was a lasting career. He is actually the ultimate career politician in that regard. But Alex, what did you think of his T-shirt stunt? You know, is looking up the black T-shirt, you know, navy blue actually, because
it's just this is what I mean. It's just why are we talking about the man's blimmin' eyelashes when the world's on fire?
No,
you know, it's like, oh, look at his eyelashes, look at his T-shirt. No, why are we releasing rapists?
Well, Jezza and I had a disagreement about this morning because Jezza was in a kind of, you know, happy Friday mood and mucking around a bit on the show this morning, and he kept playing clips of Andy Burnham looking down at his T-shirt going, well, it's navy blue actually. And he was like, oh, what's that all about? I said, I actually think quite a lot of women will quite like it. And at least it was sort of a little bit more human and funny than anything Keir Starmer ever does. I mean, earlier on, we showed some pictures of Keir Starmer. I don't know what he was doing, but he was looking at some sort of robot figure covered in plastic. And initially, I thought it was a model of himself.
Well, no, that is true. At least Andy Burnham appears to be able to communicate rather than through whale noises and saying the words far right. But, you know, we will see. I do think, though, he is indicative of... I'm going to sound a little bit sexist here against women, but I think he is indicative of this sort of feminisation of the national psyche, the sort of be kind movement that we care more whether someone's got tickets to Taylor Swift and plaits their daughter's hair than whether they can make the tough decisions. But there you are. Let's see. Nothing's happened yet. Maybe there's going to be a leadership contest. I doubt it. But I think there's going to be a lot of twists and turns to come, without a doubt. Once he becomes Prime Minister, he's not going to be getting an easy ride. Isabel, thank you ever so much. The brilliant Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. What are your thoughts on Mr Burnham and everything else we're talking about today? 03444 99 1000 is the number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed you can call that number. Kieran is poised, ready to take down your details, and we actually give you a call back when the time is right. So there you go. That is what I consider to be proper British customer service. You can also text me 8722, write the word talk before you send your message. We're going to be taking a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be finding out a little bit more about the royal family's financial affairs. Was it the right decision to disclose this information? Has it just got tongues wagging when perhaps vanishingly few people really cared? Or do we care about what they're paying in taxation? And the fact that despite millions and millions in refurbishments for Buckingham Palace, no royals are going to live there. That's what we're discussing just after this.
Lara Bird on Monday walked into the House of Commons as the new MP for Arbroath. She had a lot of attitude and held up her fingers as if she wasn't telling the truth and didn't really respect the king, and that was picked up online.
So I think if you're silly and trivial in that way, you rather deserve to get caught out, but I'm afraid everyone will now remember her as the fake Scottish accent lady.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, how much cash does the royal family really have? How much do they cost us? Do they pay their taxes? Is it all worth it? Questions that circulate every now and then in the public domain. Well, they're certainly going to be circulating now, as the royal family have taken the rather unprecedented decision to disclose a lot about their financial affairs. Now, the Queen had already decided that she was going to be the first monarch to start paying income tax, and when he was Prince Charles, the current king also started publishing details of his tax affairs. But what we've got laid out before us is a very eye-opening audit, let's say, of quite how much the royal family cost, the service to their buildings, their residency decisions, and, of course, the money they put back into the United Kingdom. Does it all balance out? Is it worth it? Should we be having this conversation? Well, let's talk now to Norman Baker, who's author of What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. Good morning, Norman. The usual characters are going to be talking today, members of Republic and so forth, about, well, look, this is how much they're getting in core funding. It's going to be doubling within 3 years, rising to 100 million a year by 2027 to 2028. That profits are up on the Crown estates, and they are paying income tax, but at the same time, they're raking it in.
They are, and I'm afraid that whether you're a monarchist or a Republican, you need to look at this in a cold way, and they are not, I'm afraid, very good value for money. The total cost of the monarchy, taking into account everything that they get, is around £500 million a year. That's more than 10 times the cost of the next nearest monarchy in Europe, which is the Dutch monarchy at 46 million. And as you rightly say, Alex, the deal that came out yesterday is another very good one for the monarchy, because the core element of the sovereign grant, which is the main form of funding from the public purse, is doubling in a 3-year period. This is not a slimmed down monarchy we're getting, we're getting a fattening monarchy.
But then I would put to you this, OK? Yes, the monarchy costs a fair whack of money. 500 million sounds like an extremely huge amount for one family, although you've got travel costs, staffing costs, so on and so forth. But if you're going to look in terms of entire budgets and the value that that money might bring, you say the Dutch monarchy is 46 million a year. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody in America's watching documentaries about them. Donald Trump wasn't getting excited to meet the king or queen or whoever it might be over in Amsterdam. And actually, there would be people who say that actually the British royal family is the most famous royal family in the world, that in itself is worth a fortune to our standing on the world stage, the fact that we have these people who essentially work as ambassadors for the country. And people would also say, well, look, you know, we had a very elderly queen relatively recently, and as a result, she worked blimmin' hard. We all know that. But as a result, she was less able to do as many public engagements, whereas the current royal family are out there doing the hard work, getting on aeroplanes, going overseas, talking the talk with other world leaders, and making sure, actually, that some of our sort of geopolitical creases can be ironed out.
Well, look, I mean, I think the King did a good job in Washington, there's no doubt about that. However, we don't need to have peppercorn rents for Andrew and Edward for the King to do a good job. We don't need exemptions from net inheritance tax for the King to do a good job. We don't need to have massive security costs for royal members of the royal family no one's ever heard of for the King to do a good job. This is about getting value for money and making sure that the money we spend from the public purse is well spent. Now, I have to say that if you look at Buckingham Palace, for example, £369 million for refurbishment there, and we know that Charles and Camilla are not going to live there, and neither will William or Kate. But it's worse than that, actually, because apart from the enormous sum of money to spend on one building, there is income for Buckingham Palace from ticket sales. And the King has decided, and the Queen before him decided, that money was private money. So we're paying for the refurbishment of Buckingham Palace, and they're taking the money from the ticket sales from the entrance, from the visitors who come round. Now, my view is that if Buckingham Palace isn't going to be lived in by Charles and Camilla, then we should open the palace more for more visitors, and all the money from ticket sales should go to the Treasury to help offset the cost of the refurbishment.
I mean, certainly it sounds to me as if Prince William is planning to do something in that line when it comes to money he makes from renting land of the royal estate and driving that money back into the local community. Is the problem here that the royal family might be opening a bit of a Pandora's box? That sort of never complain, never explain, the mantra of the Queen, was quite fitting, really, because the royal family is rather an anachronistic thing in the modern era. And so the more that you start allowing people to analyse things such as your financial affairs, your taxation, so on and so forth, the more they're going to be pushing for it. And so where does this stop? Could this backfire?
Well, that's what it could backfire, but what could also backfire and is backfiring has been the failure to respond to public concerns about the amount of money the monarchy is costing, and a failure to understand that the public have been appalled not simply by the shenanigans of Andrew, who has opened the Pandora's box, but also, for example, the brilliant documentary on Channel 4, which revealed that Charles and William were charging, for example, the army to practice on Dartmoor, fighting the king and country, and charged them for it, charging the NHS millions of pounds to park ambulances in an empty warehouse in London, charging the Royal Navy to moor their ships when they want to refuel because it happens to be on Dutchy land. So there are a whole lot of things which that particular documentary showed, which the public at large didn't like very much. So the monarchy, in its own interest, in my view, has to reform and has to become more relevant to today's society and has to cut the costs. You know, the slimmed down monarchy that Charles talked about is not slimming down at all. It's getting fatter.
Well, fascinating stuff, actually. Thank you for bringing all of those other things to our attention. It does seem to me that if you're going to have empty warehouses, let people use them for free, for crying out loud. Norman, thank you ever so much. Extremely enlightening interview. That'll be interesting to see over the course of time how this now plays out. What are your thoughts? Is it time to get rid of the monarchy? Are we too worried about how much they're costing? Do we want them to do this level of disclosure when it comes to their financial affairs? Let me know. 03444991000. That's on WhatsApp. 87222 on text. Let's do some messages now because I haven't opened up that little box of treats yet. Paul in Fife says, Alex, after President Trump's comments about Starmer and Burnham and the UK, it begs the question, are we being governed by people who actually wish to harm this country, our economy, our way of life and our history? Trump is the most powerful, influential president we have seen in decades. He is basically writing us off as a country and as a culture. He's not wrong. At what point is revolution our only weapon to save our country? Well, let's do it through democracy first, right? We've still got another general election. I know. It's been over 10 years since that historic referendum in 2016, which was supposed to be, as far as I can tell, the fulcrum, that moment at which the elites listened to the people and realised that we wanted a drastically different direction in our governance. But it hasn't happened yet. Next time, folks. All rapists, paedophiles and killers should be used for drugs testing and other things that need testing, rather than using animals, and castrated using lidocaine, not a general anaesthetic. Maybe a few Labour MPs as well. That's a bit spicy for 10:30 in the morning. OK. Although I do think I have this thing that, you know, when you have rehabilitation should be the core of especially those serving shorter sentences. And I've said for a long time, I don't know why we don't allow convicts who are trying to get back out into the world of work the opportunity to do things like go and be seasonal workers rather than importing a load of randoms from Eastern Europe. Wouldn't that make sense? Alex, your guest just said the royal family costs $500 million a year. That's the same as our national debt goes up every day. Right, it is funny, 500 million sounds like a lot. Would be a lot if it is in your or my back pocket, but in the grand scheme of things, it is a drop in the ocean. Is it worth it? Oh, it's not a subject that exercises me enormously. I tend to say yes, because it is a strange thing about our royal family. There are many royal families on planet Earth, but no one's got a royal family quite as famous or perhaps infamous as our own. We are going to be taking a short break now. When we come back, we're joined by the wonderful, the excellent, the inimitable Rafe Hadel-Mancu, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, to talk flags, culture wars, all the good stuff. That's coming up after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show, and welcome aboard HMS Common Sense, the glorious, often west-cutted Rafe Hadel-Mancu. How are you doing? I'm sure you're not wearing your, to use your own accent, westcut in this heat.
No, I've managed to make one concession and one compromise, but very rare.
You still look dapper as always, in a bow tie nonetheless. I mean, this is why we love you, Rafe, this and your wisdom. So let's tap into the latter as we have your sartorial elegance in sight. First of all, I want to ask you about the royal family, as we were just discussing it before the break. Was this a good move, a power move, or is this Charles being a little bit naive, of trying a little bit too hard, to be a little bit too #be kind?
Well, the jury's out. We'll have to see whether, as Churchill said about appeasers, whether feeding the crocodile will actually appease them or not. But certainly, the king has been very keen to show the modernisation of the monarchy. He's wanted a slimmed-down monarchy. I think this has been a sufficient degree of transparency. I know people are wanting to know more about where every source of income is and every investment and every capital gain. But if he gave that information, then basically people are asking the king to surrender more information than you get from a private citizen. You know, we don't know all the financial details of the prime minister or of business leaders or other government officials. So I think the king has given more than enough information now, and I would hope that that would satisfy his critics, although we know it won't.
It never will. Let's talk now about, well, this is a positive, which is the idea that churches should be encouraged to fly the St George's Cross during the World Cup. That's according to the Right Reverend Martin Snow, who's the Bishop of Leicester. He actually chairs the Church of England's working group for promoting unity, and he says that during the World Cup especially, that flying the national flag is a symbol of national togetherness. Too true. It'd be great to see. Probably unlikely to see it, though, are we?
Well, hats and mitres off to the bishop for coming out and saying that. But I'm amazed that it needs to be said. What a sad state of affairs that priests and others have to be encouraged to fly the flag of St George. Because, of course, there was a time when I was young, and you can still see it here and there. If you go to the Cotswolds, you go to the English countryside, there is nothing more quintessentially English than a country Saxon church flying the flag of England above it. Because, since 1938, the Cross of St George has been the official flag of Anglican churches to fly. It is the Church of England. It is their flag to fly. And it's amazing that at this time, you don't see them flying more often. We're told it's because clergy and priests feel uncomfortable flying the flag in this context, or in this rather tense time. On the contrary, I don't believe the flag has been captured by the so-called far right, but we were told, of course, that the Olympic Games had managed to get the Union flag back from the so-called far right. And I would say, if you do believe that, this is just the time for churches and other institutions to fly the flag of England and fly it with great gusto. It is a quintessentially peaceful sight to see the English flag flying over an English churchyard. And what's also outrageous is that the Mayor of London, the capital of England. Remember, London is the capital of England. If you go to Edinburgh and Cardiff, and you will see the Scottish and Welsh flags flying everywhere, but you go outside City Hall and you won't see it. And he's always had form on this, When we left the EU, there were 3 flagpoles outside London City Hall in the centre of London, and the EU flag was lowered, leaving just the Union flag and the City of London and the London Assembly flag there. So I wrote to him at the time and I said, can you please fly the flag of England, given London is the capital city, from the 3rd flagpole? Instead, he flew another London Assembly flag. So you had 2 London Assembly flags and the Union flag. That's how much this man hates England and its flag, and it's a disgrace that it's not flying at London City Hall during the World Cup.
I totally agree. Also, let's stick on this note, by the way, because I was thinking, who better to ask this question, because it's a little burning frustration of mine, which is, please, can we have an English national anthem? I mean, I don't know where you stand on this, but I feel like Britain uses God Save the King. I would put my vote in the Land of Hope and Glory box. I think that's a brilliant banger of an anthem. I think it'd be great to be able to start pushing our own English identity.
Yes, so historically, see, I've always been opposed to devolution. So I didn't want there to be a Scottish Parliament or a Welsh Assembly. And I find this sort of dividing us all up a great threat to the Union. And so I actually would prefer, ideally, to have no Scottish anthem or Welsh anthem at sporting matches. It should just be God Save the King for everybody. If there were England versus Scotland, they should only be singing God Save the King. But we are where we are, and we do have Flower of Scotland and everything else being sung. So yes, in this context, it does make sense, I would say, for there to be an English flag. I would say Rose of England, or There'll Always Be in England, Jerusalem, Land of Hope and Glory, many great contenders for that. And of course, it is devolution that has basically fostered this sense of English identity, you know, because devolution and the identity politics of today offend that most English of qualities, and that's the sense of fair play, because they see the Scots and the Welsh rewarded for their nationalism. When they wave their flags, it's called progressive nationalism. When the English do it, it's racist. You know, you see Palestinian flags, you see pride flags. Everyone is encouraged to celebrate their identity with one exception, and that's England and the English, and that sticks in the craw.
I want to talk now about the brilliant Catherine Birballs-Singh, our most famous headmistress, the so-called strictest headmistress who runs the Michaela Community School in Brent. She was talking at the ARC conference, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship conference, a bit of a sort of right, centre-right academic conflab. That she says a lifetime in schools, it's pretty clear. She was referring to the really atrocious Henry Novak case and the police officers who arrested him despite the fact he was dying from stab wounds. She says they were not evil. They were not incompetent. They were terrified of being seen as racist. And she basically says that, you know, young people have been so consumed by this idea of white guilt that they would do crazy, irrational and inhumane things rather than risk being seen as racist. I mean, it's funny, talking to Isabel earlier, Isabel Oakeshott there, and we were talking about how puerile and facile a lot of our politics has become. And I kind of think it's this sort of strange infantilization, feminization of the national psyche. And I wrote down on my sheet of paper lanyardism, because what it comes down to, at the heart of all of this stuff, if there's some sort of acronym you could use, or an international day, or some sort of, you know, virtue signalling lanyard, this is the problem. We've got to wash our country clean of essentially what Elon Musk would call the woke mind virus.
Yes, and hats off to the brilliant Catherine. I was at the conference, I had a nice chat with her as well, and she's absolutely right. I mean, what we're seeing now is the result of decades, or since the 1990s certainly, of teaching white guilt, white privilege, you know, colonial shame, that Britain and America are uniquely evil in the world, and that we are born into a state of original sin, that original sin being racism, and that has replaced religion. We used to be shamed for sinning against God. Now we're sinned and shamed if we are deemed to have actually had said or done anything that is deemed to be racist. And now, of course, those people who grew up in the 90s and 2000s, these are now our police officers. These are now people in their 20s, 30s, 40s in our institutions. And for this generation, being labeled racist is the worst possible moral failing. Well, I suppose just above paedophilia, or just alongside paedophilia. But it's worse than committing theft or assault or doing anything else. And that's why you see people petrified by political correctness, that they won't actually intervene and look for a stab wound on Henry Novak. That's the dire state that we're in. And you know what's most amazing? I speak about this quite a lot to show you the level of cognitive dissonance and the complete myth-making that exists in our institutions and our schools. If you ask young people what is the #1 issue facing Britain today, you would have thought they would say Brexit or climate change or something like that. They think it's racism. They think racism is the single biggest issue facing Britain, even though all of the evidence shows that Britain is the world's 3rd least racist country, behind only Brazil and Sweden. We've got the World Values Survey conducted by left-wing universities around the world, which shows how unracist Britain is. Even the EU was forced to admit that the black experience in Britain is better than anywhere else in Europe. And despite all that evidence, This is what the woke mind virus does. They still believe, actually, that Britain is inherently a racist country when there's no better place to be.
These identitarians, they're given these roles, aren't they? You know, 80 grand jobs a year to push LGBTQ or diversity and inclusion, whatever it may be. And they've got to come out of rubbish. They've got to create the racism for having something to fight. Interestingly, this sort of ties in to a speech made by Danny Kruger, who, of course, was the former Conservative MP who defected to Reform UK last September, who made that rip-roaring speech in the Commons a year ago about the importance of Christianity. Empty green benches, but it went viral on the internet, which was really, I think, quite heartwarming for those of us who were church attendees. He's made a brilliant speech, I would suggest, at the ARC conference, talking about not being against individuals, that minorities mustn't fear the party's revolution, that actually he wants common allegiance, not fighting trans people, but the doctrine of personal self-creation, not fighting Muslims, but Islam that recognises no allegiance to the king in Parliament, that marches for Gaza, but sees no sin in the subjection of women and the rape of children. It actually, to me, shows a sort of different edge now to Reform UK. What a Farage-led entity once was, which was sort of tub-thumping and strident, to something a lot more, let's say, philosophical, a lot more rounded. What do you make of what he said at ARC?
Yes, well, I mean, I would have qualified it, and I would have said, yes, no group, of course, no group should feel that there's anything to fear from the Reform Party or the revolution that it will unfurl when it gets into power, God willing. But, of course, as long as you're law-abiding, of course, and as long as you are integrated and as long as you are contributing to society and you're not a net drain, if you are, tick one of those boxes, then you should have something to fear. But as a whole, of course, no community should feel. And the problem here, of course, is that the left have been so successful, and places like The Guardian, Channel 4, the Green Party, in demonising reform so much that they have genuinely instilled fear amongst people on the left and amongst the youth of this country who genuinely believe that the Reform Party is some fascist far-right party, when, of course, it's actually just stating things which would have been perfectly normal in the 1970s for the Conservative Party. I mean, in the Edward Heath, in the 1970 Conservative Manifesto, voluntary paid remigration was actually on that manifesto, but that's how things have gone. So it's very important that actually that people are made aware of the fact that the reform is nothing to be scared of. They are simply concerned about the plight of this country and of British people. Now, having said all of that, I am a bit, like yourself, church-going and everything else, but we must always accentuate and stress the importance of Christianity as one of the key foundation of Western civilization. But Britain is not America, and pushing too hard on Christian nationalism in this country won't fly. The last census, there were more atheists in this country than there were Christians, and I do think you need to tailor the message very much for a British audience, understanding, respecting, and of course protecting Christianity, emphasizing the importance of it, but not leading too much with that.
Rafe, brilliant having you on the programme as per usual. The glorious Rafe Hadel-Mancu there. The most stylish man in Britain, I like to think. Right, now, after the break, it's your opportunity to step up and be counted. I'd love to speak to some of you, so do not tarry. 03444991000 is the number to dial. It is your normal network rate. 8722 is the number to send a text message, of course, like the word talk before you text. 03444991000 can also be used to send a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note. Kieran Amos says his suggestion for the English national anthem is I Vow to Thee, My Country. It's a banger. I'm still land of hope, though. Right, taking a break. Back after this.
Lara Bird on Monday walked into the House of Commons as the new MP for Arbroath. She had a lot of attitude and held up her fingers as if she wasn't telling the truth and didn't really respect the king, and that was picked up online.
So I think if you're silly and trivial in that way, you rather deserve to get caught out, but I'm afraid everyone will now remember her as the fake Scottish accent lady.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Shall we hit up the phone lines? Let's speak now to Barry, who's in Norwich. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, Alex. I'd just like to say that I'm under a Green council in Norwich, so I'm a minority. Yeah.
Oh, pray for Barry. That is awful. What sort of dastardly things have they been doing? Do you have, like, the trans flag and the pro-Palestine flag and all of that flying from your civic buildings?
Yeah, there's every flag under the rainbow flying from the City Hall, apart from the Union flag or the flag of St George. Oh. The flag of St George is flying outside my window.
Oh, good for you, Barry.
Yeah. But anyway, I'd just like to mention the royal family, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Right, I am a Republican. I don't hide it. I'm a Republican, and I became even more of a staunch Republican after 1997. But I just think this is an outdated institution. Yeah. We shouldn't have to pay all that money to refurb Buckingham Palace and pocket it, like your guest was saying. Yeah, and he charges, for the Navy to bore up, and he charges the NHS. You know, they don't live in the real world. I watched the King's speech, and you had a guy and a woman sitting there, draped in gold on gold thrones. You know what I mean? You know, talking about how skint the country was, and we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And I just think, you know, if you want to live in all them palaces and you want to finance it yourself, I mean, he didn't pay any inheritance tax on the billions that his mum left him. Yeah, you know, if I get left any money, I have to pay inheritance tax. Yeah, I just don't. There's so many things that just don't sit right with me, the royal family, and I just think, you know, they're an outdated institution, and they should be concealed to the depths of history. We don't. I think this country would function quite well under presidential system.
Oh no! Imagine having a president and it being someone like President Blair.
No, but like at least they would be able to come back. Do you know what I mean? They're only there for a fixed term, aren't they? It's like the House of Lords. I think we should get rid of the House of Lords. I just think that's good.
I would sooner. I would wonder, do you know, I might look this up during the next advert break. I wonder how much the civil service pays for wokery, you know, or the DEI, all of that stuff, if that's more than 500 million. Because for me, the royal family, I'm less exercised about who pays what tax, Yes, it's the ethical thing to do, so on and so forth. But in the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of budgets, 500 million to me isn't a great amount of money. And yet our royal family is so symbolic of Britishness. It is one of the most exportable tropes about the United Kingdom. It brings in millions of people to come and look at said palaces, to go and visit the gardens, you know, the tongue waggers, the gossip columnists. To me, if we were to get rid of that, so many other countries would love to have an asset as prominent internationally, I would say, as the House of Windsor. But I understand people who say, well, it's a bit anachronistic and it doesn't seem to me to be great bang for the buck. Barry, thank you ever so much. Let's quickly squeeze in Peter, who's in Liverpool. Good morning, Peter.
Hi, Alex. About the monarchy, I feel it's become a soap opera, especially when it's introduced by Harry and Meghan. Everything they seem to get up to, it's kind of Hollywood style. I just don't think the monarchy live in the same world as the ordinary people today. They're just we're being taxed to the hilt, and the monarchy are not standing for the people. They're supposed to be he's supposed to stand for Christianity. You hardly ever hear him speak up for the Church of England.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, look, every monarch does things differently. I have high hopes for William, I must admit. I hear he is privately sort of exploring his Christian faith and so on and so forth. But I just think about all these huge historic institutions. You know, you kind of don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, is what I would warn.
Why are they exempt from the Freedom of Information Act?
Wow, because that would sort of ruin all the mystique. Never complain, never explain. They are, of course, still the head of state as well, which is quite a unique situation constitutionally, or perhaps unconstitutionally. Pete, I've got to love you and leave you, though, my darling, because we're coming to the top of the hour, which means I've got to stick in a disciplined manner to the time in which we throw to an advert break. But I am around for the next 2 hours to discuss a lot more and take more calls. So if you want to be like Peter and have a chin wag, you know the number by now, 0344 499 1000. OK, right, go put the kettle on. Don't go too far, though, because I am back just...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the programme. And, well, it's been a fun first hour, hasn't it? Lots to discuss here. A lot of people messaging in about the royal family, lots of different views on that. It's always funny, this sort of debate pops up every now and then, and it's always, you know, I lick my finger, put it up in the air and go, do we still want a monarchy? And I think 9 times out of 10 it comes back and says, yes, we do. But keep your thoughts coming in on that topic, because it is fascinating. It's one of the sort of most symbolic things, and to me it's a litmus, really, of what brand Britain looks like and how much we're still attached to it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to send a WhatsApp. 87222 to send a text message. Write the word talk before you text, though, if you're going to do that. Right, let us now get back to the political news of the day, explore some of the headlines in that department, because we're joined by Henry Murison, who's the founder of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership and a former Labour staffer. A man who might know a thing or two about Burnhamism. So let me start off with that. Burnhamism. What is it? What might it look like? Because it seems to me we've got a pre-anointed Prime Minister in waiting, and I'm yet to hear whether he's going to tear up the manifesto that Sir Keir Starmer was elected on and do something radically different. And if so, what's it going to be? Because what we got from his morning press conference after the Makerfield by-election was, I would say, a lot of vibes, positive vibes, nicely delivered vibes, heartwarming sound bites and turns of phrase and quips and humour. But what about the politics? Because we live in extremely stressful political times.
I think whether you call it sort of Burnhamism or Manchesterism, I think Andy has definitely caught people's imagination in terms of a bit of speculation about what he might actually do. Now, obviously, there are some areas like transport policy or regional kind of economic policy, which he's been working on sort of full time as Mayor of Greater Manchester. So in those areas, for example, the fact he wants to improve connectivity, better rail links across the country, you can kind of guess what he's going to do with that, because he's got pretty strong opinions and he's been working on those issues in lots of detail for the last few months and years. I think on issues like defence, I'm always one of these people who'd rather say what they don't know than claim on programmes like this that they're some sort of soothsayer. Does that make sense? Because I just think it's too early to tell. And I mean, the Prime Minister hasn't even left office yet. Obviously, Andy, I think, is expected to make some significant interventions next week and start to set out his agenda. And I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I'm prepared to give Andy a bit of time to hear what he's got to say about those things that he hasn't been thinking about as much when he has been a full-time elected Metro Mayor till a week ago, right? Just over a week that he's now been in Parliament since he was elected.
You say he hasn't been thinking about these things. He's been planning this. He's been planning the sort of stepping down of someone in a constituency so he could make a run specifically to become Prime Minister for ages now. Do you not think it's slightly lackadaisical to say, well, you know, now he's going to become Prime Minister, we'll have to wait and see what he does because, who cares about democracy?
Well, I take your previous point as well, and I didn't want to sort of gas on for too long, but I think the reality is the Labour manifesto is the Labour manifesto, just because, I mean, the whole point of this being not a presidential system is that the party of government can choose whoever they want to be their leader, but they also can't unwrite the commitments they made to the British public. So I think the kind of trade-off position for the fact that you can't claim that this person doesn't have a mandate, because no MP has a mandate more than the people who've elected them, and his one is more recent than other MPs because he was only elected a week ago. So he has a mandate like any other Prime Minister would from his own local constituency. The manifesto that Keir Starmer stood on is the one that the Labour Party...
So what's the point? What's the point of all this wasting our time, changing the man at the top to change the direction of the country if he's not going to do anything differently?
Well, I mean, the manifesto doesn't cover every issue that's come up in the last 2 years. It covers some of them. And I think the point is that Labour MPs have obviously come to the collective view. I think it's now very obvious that they want Andy to be the Prime Minister because he represents their best chance to take the time they've got left before the next general election, because that could only be about 3 years away, to do some of the things that they hope that this government could do, but which that the current Prime Minister has lost momentum.
Okay, like what? That's what I want to know.
I mean, I think you've already heard from Andy, I think, this week, is that he wants to address some of the fundamental inequalities in this country. Now, that was in the Labour manifesto. That's not a new thing. The point is the current government hasn't managed to make any progress, or made very limited progress on that agenda. So I think what you're talking about here is the ability of the Prime Minister and their government to do the things they promised in the manifesto to do. The test that I think Keir Starmer has largely failed is not that the agenda that he stood on 2 years ago was the wrong one, but he struggled to implement it. And the realities of governing... I want to get into some granular detail here because, you know, I vote in this country, I pay my taxes in the country. If this man's going to be Prime Minister, I want to know, the people listening to this programme want to know. Nay, we have a right to know what he's going to do. So, I mean, let's look at the welfare bill, because I know for a fact that the IMF were looking at our economy going, well, that's going to be junked unless you can start massively cutting back on welfare handouts. We know the backbenchers revolted, refused to pass the Welfare Reform Act. We then had Rachel Reeves turn around and go, oh, do you know what? Let's dish out a little bit more in welfare by lifting the two-child benefit cap, which seemed to be going in the wrong direction of travel when it comes to making necessary costs to pump money into the economy where necessary to grow it.
So what is he going to do? Are we going to see the Welfare Reform Act come back? Will he have the ability to be able to say to backbench MPs, pass the blimmin' thing, or guess what? I'm going to call an election.
I mean, I think it's very simple, which is that actually I talked a bit before about things where he has done things. There are examples of what he's done in this space. So that since the very beginning of devolution in Greater Manchester, the mayoralty there have been working with central government to get people off benefits and into work. And in fact, they were financially incentivised when George Osborne was Chancellor, before Andy was even the mayor, to do that. That's been happening for years. And the problem with the government's current policy on this is they haven't got a solution to get the NEETs back to work. They haven't had one. We've now got Alan Milburn's review, which sets out a very clear direction of travel. And so I think it's a combination of things, because you don't just change the benefit system, you also have to change the system for getting people who want to work back into work. The problem at the moment has been it's very hard to cut working age benefits when we're not doing a good enough job of getting those people who want to work back into employment. And it's a more rounded issue, because a lot of the cost pressures in the welfare budget are not just working age people, they're also the triple lock. And I know that a number of people who've been advising Andy Burnham and who've long-standing people who've worked with him, like my former colleague Jim O'Neill, who was our chair at the Northern Powerhouse Partnership for a number of years, have said very clearly that there needs to be something done about the triple lock. Because if you're going to address working age benefits, you also need to address the fact that if you look at the triple lock, that is in the longer term unaffordable beyond this Parliament. And so if you want to set a good agenda with the markets, if you want to give confidence that this government is going to balance the books, then addressing working age benefits and pensions is the way to do it. And that means having a fair and credible offer to working age people that says we will get you into work, but that you haven't got an option not to work. And that says to pensioners that you will still get a generous settlement from the government, but not quite as generous in future parliaments as the one you've had in this one, because it's not possible to raise enough taxes to pay for that without upsetting the working age population who do work and pay their taxes, as you were saying.
It seems to me that media outlets are being used a little bit like focus groups, because certain ideas, certain policy positions are being flown up the flagpole, and I think, we're waiting to see what public reaction is. One such was actually increasing capital gains tax to 40% to bring it in line with income tax, and use that, for instance, to scrap green levies. Do we know where these policies are coming from? Who's putting them out there? Is this going to be indicative of who might become our Chancellor and what sort of approach they're going to take?
I think on tax policy, the Labour Party's having an active debate about the fact that one of the problems with the manifesto is it put a number of straitjackets on your ability to raise money. And the financial circumstances of the country have changed markedly in the last 2 years. So you can look back and say Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer shouldn't have made those particular promises, because they were probably ones that were going to be very hard to stick to, and not knowing what was going to happen over the coming few years. That's probably been the government's biggest failing, that it's promised better public services, lots of change, but hasn't got the ability to raise the money it needs to do the things that it wants to do. Now, if there are ways by taxing wealth rather than just earnings that are able to help bring in significant additional funding to the government and to help balance those books, because the whole point about being a competent government is not just about the choices you make. Do you spend more, or do you and do you tax more, or do you tax less, and do you spend less? I mean, either are perfectly defensible positions for any government to take, whether you're on the left or right of politics. The point is you have to balance the books. And the current government has the problem that because of the war in Iran, because of lots of other things that have happened, and the inheritance they had, which I think they were right in arguing wasn't the most positive one financially for the government, they are in a proper mess. And so someone has got to sort that out. And the first job for the new Chancellor isn't to find money for Andy's spending priorities, bluntly. It's to make sure that coming into a budget in the autumn, that we can maintain the confidence of markets and the country can stay solvent. That is fundamentally what they've got to do. And then anything else that comes after that is a nice to have. But fundamentally, if the country cannot demonstrate that it's going to balance the books, then we can't borrow the money for all the infrastructure and the other things that in the end will generate tax revenues.
We're in trouble deep. Our borrowing is off the charts at the moment. Thank you very much, Rachel. Is he going to hold a general election? Is it right that he holds a general election?
No, because I mean, we discussed earlier in this chat and this interview, and I think anyone else who's familiar with our system of government, I mean, all those people sitting their A-levels across the country, I remember doing mine 20 odd years ago, I wish it had been more recent, studies parliamentary democracy, and people study it in their citizenship lessons every day in schools up and down the country, and we do not live in a presidential system. Like, that is not how our country
But he ran a presidential campaign in Makerfield, didn't he?
Well,
He can't say we don't live in a presidential system, but I'm going to become the new leader of the Labour Party and base my entire local campaign on that particular subject matter. People voted for him because they voted to get Starmer out. So you can't have it both ways. Surely the right thing to do, if you've just popped up, you know, minute you're Greater Manchester Mayor, nah, let's have another election there. I fancy having a go at becoming PM. Oh, look, no one's going to stand against me. I'm going to become PM. And then, great, I'm not going to have an election now. I mean, he's taken us for mugs, isn't he? Yes, you might say that we don't live in a presidential system, but on one hand, he's acting as if we do.
But I mean, I'm just saying this is the rules of the game. It's the British Constitution. Don't
yes,
argue
but there's
with me.
the spirit of the game as well, and there's a spirit of democracy. In demos comes the word for people, and krasi comes from the Greek word for power. And it'd be quite nice to feel like people had the power to decide whether or not they want this character to suddenly be Prime Minister.
And we don't live in a direct democracy either. We live in a representative democracy.
We don't seem to live in a democracy at all. That's the point I'm making.
No, we did. People elected their MPs 2 years ago, and those MPs have very quickly, it seemed, come to the view on Keir Starmer's departure this week. Feels like longer, but it was only a few days ago, that they want a different leader and it's going to be Andy Burnham. And the whole point is those people were all elected by people who pay their taxes and have a vote, and they chose, rightly or wrongly, to vote Labour in large numbers at the last election in lots of constituencies, and that's how the rules of the game work. In France, they have a president. The president can pick whoever he wants to be Prime Minister. They don't have to be elected to anything. You can pick whoever you like. Our system means that in order to be Prime Minister of the country, you have to be a member of Parliament. And because of the way that elected mayors have policing powers, they can't do two jobs at once.
I mean, come on, you do understand. You must understand what I'm saying about the rules of the game and then the spirit of the game here. Because you can look back at Mr. Burnham's own record on social media during the magical musical chairs of the Conservative Party, and he and many of his colleagues pushed again and again and again, general election now. He seemed to think a few years ago, during the Boris Johnson foray and the Liz Truss foray, in the Rishi Sunak foray, that democratically the British people deserved to be consulted. He was very vocal about it. So why does that sentiment not apply when it's him deciding to just, oh, I don't want to be Greater Manchester Mayor anymore. I think I might become Prime Minister. Oh, Yabu sucks. You've now got to live with that.
I mean, having done this job for almost a decade, including some time working for George Osborne, who was obviously a former Conservative Chancellor, I've seen quite a lot of Prime Ministers come and go, and in some years them come and go in the space of a year. I mean, we had Boris, then Liz, then Rishi in the space of just a few months. And I think that however chaotic the last few days have been and the last few weeks have been, the one thing I would say is that actually the way in which Keir Starmer's behaved deserves some credit, because he has not held on.
That's not what we're talking about. I'm not talking about the way Starmer's behaved. I'm talking about the fact that Andy Burnham banged the drum repeatedly for there to be democratic accountability through a national ballot when the Prime Minister changed. He did that. He said that. His colleagues reinforced it again and again and again. If it's good enough for the goose, why not for the gander? Well, people out there want an election.
I mean, I think some people might want an election, but we've always got to remember our friend Brenda in Bristol. And there are some people who...
Come on, it's hypocritical though, isn't it? It's hypocritical to be calling for a general election when the Conservative Party were faffing round, playing Let's Change Who's at the Top, and to say, no, it doesn't apply to us.
But I mean, I think we've just been discussing the fact that this is a party with a huge mandate, promised to do lots of things.
Boris Johnson had a massive mandate.
Yeah, but the other side of the equation is they've only been in office for 2 years, and if they are going to go back to the British people, they have to be able to demonstrate whether they've done the things that they promised they would do, and they haven't yet had the chance to do that. The last Conservative government, by the time we got to Rishi, had very many prime ministers and had been in office for a very long time and had run out of steam. That was a completely different context to what we're now looking at.
I think we're picking at straws here. I really cannot see if Andy Burnham thought we should have a general election when the Conservative leader changed and that person automatically became Prime Minister, why that doesn't apply to him. I'm afraid that's just hypocrisy, pure and simple. You know it. I know it. Everyone listening knows it. Let's talk now about this Labour plan, which is to get social media to push for what they're calling trusted news outlets by forcing tech giants to boost news from public service media providers. The BBC, ITV and Channel 4, why are they doing this? What is the motivation?
I mean, I think the challenge is that many of the sources of news people get on social media are not the most reliable ones. And I'm not referring to outlets like this, but ones that don't have the type of journalistic standards that, for example, your owners at News UK would insist on across both their print and online platforms. And if you look at some of the things that we've seen on the internet in the last few days, in the last couple of weeks, we've had a film of Nigel Farage and the Bank of England governor having a fight on telly on the Question Time set. We've had spurious news about Keir Starmer's potential successor's wife, Andy's wife, for example, on media, which are completely untrue. And so I do think that when we have so much fake news flying around, I don't think it's unreasonable that those outlets that do have to follow different rules, it's not just public broadcasting in the narrow sense of the BBC, the ITV, others are held to the same principles. I do think it's right that is a yardstick because that regulation is significant. And
so we're talking about professional accredited news organisations, people who, like me, have gone to journalism school, got her BJTC, was trained up by the BBC as well, people who know their McNay, they understand probity, they understand discretion, they understand keeping sources confidential, and they understand balance. Are we talking about that rather than it being potentially preferentially promoting more left-leaning outlets? Because one thing we have learnt recently as part of the ongoing COVID inquiry is quite how much the government, and albeit it wasn't the Labour Party government, but the government lent upon not only outlets but social media companies to completely control the narrative.
I think I take a particular view that I want to protect journalism, whatever its political leanings, when it's fair and impartial, and that's really important. I mean, I think I would reject the notion that either the BBC that has Robbie Gibb on its editorial standards committee.
He's one person on a board.
Yeah, no, but I mean, has a direct influence over editorial standards is somehow some sort of left-wing conspiracy organisation. I just don't think that's true. So I would reject the notion that the public service broadcasters are left-leaning. I think that's unfair. And I think people who work at
BBC's own head of news recently quit, basically saying she was bullied out of the job by radical trans activists.
Well, I mean, I take it. I mean, I take a different view engaging with these organisations. I don't think they are politically biased at all. And I think you do have the reality check that you have X, for example, which is owned by someone who is literally trying to stoke violence on our streets and is directly seeking to cause violence against particular groups in our communities. And I think in that context, we live in very challenging times.
As you know, Henry, journalistically, Mr. Musk isn't here to give his right of reply there. So, you know, doing the sort of professional journalism thing, I am sure that he would refute those particular allegations. But in terms of the model, I understand social media companies now have a huge amount of sway. And if algorithms and certain things being promoted can be determined by a trillionaire owner, then perhaps these are questions that we need to ask. Henry, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your Friday morning to talk to all of us. If you want to get in touch with the programme and comment on anything we're talking about, that is how we roll. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. It's your normal network rate. You can also send me a WhatsApp message on that number or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp on that number, or a ditty, or a rap, or a tune, or a message of well-wishing to the country. A tip on how to stay cool, how to make your own air conditioning system using a Grecian urn, a wet towel and a desk fan. You can also send me a text message, 87222, write the word talk before you text, and then you can also, most importantly, give me a call on 0344 499 1000, because we are going to be taking calls just after this break.
Lara Bird on Monday walked into the House of Commons as the new MP for Arbroath. She had a lot of attitude and held up her fingers as if she wasn't telling the truth and didn't really respect the king, and that was picked up online.
So I think if you're silly and trivial in that way, you rather deserve to get caught out, but I'm afraid everyone will now remember her as the fake Scottish accent lady.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Shall we have a chinwag, you and I? Let's start off with Paul, who's in Hartlepool. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Alex. It's about the royal family. They're well worth their money, right? Because they're bringing money for the country. But if you look at the COVID's inquiry, right? It's been going on forever. It's about 350 million up to now. That people are just sat in offices looking at the computer and sharpening cleaning the nails and all that, And basically, the amount of waste that's going on in these inquiries, there should be a law that makes them come into Parliament on a set day once every 6 weeks and tell the people of the country what they've done in that inquiry, how far they've gone in the inquiry.
Oh, we have inquiries into everything now. Do you think we need an inquiry into inquirers to decide whether or not we need to keep spending millions on inquiries? Because all I ever hear is we're going to have an inquiry, a load of barristers and consultants get paid ludicrous amounts of money, and then what we hear is lessons will be learned, and then nothing really changes.
Well, it's the amount of money between them. It's ridiculous. For them not to, I don't know what we're going to do. There's another pandemic. Nobody let that actually said to the people of the country, this is what we're going to do if there's another pandemic. Nobody knows.
Right. Oh, we haven't discussed, have we, really, whether lockdowns were damaging or not? We've learnt about information control and the so-called nudge unit, although it's interesting, the minute we've reached that particular phase in the inquiry, the newspapers have gone strangely very quiet. I think there's a lot more that went on than we are being told, and disclosing some of that information to us might perhaps be a little bit too dangerous. We'll suddenly see behind the curtain and see Oz himself and realise that, really, he's not much of a wizard at all. Paul, thank you very much for your call. Let's speak now to Pat, who's in London. Good morning, Pat.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, I mean, me personally, about the royal family, I couldn't give a care whether they're in situ or not. They don't really do anything for my life. Not that I expect them to, but, I've got an idea to give them the legitimacy I think they need.
OK.
In this modern era. It's a national referendum.
What, a referendum on whether we keep the monarchy or not?
Yes. But me personally, I'm not a royalist, as I said, but I think they would just about nudge it. And that...
Do you not think, though... I understand where you're coming from, although it's not very royal to say, would you like a vote on whether to abolish us? It's more parliamentary. But do you not think that that would open such a can of worms? Because once this debate starts, it only ever grows. And then countries around the world that still consider the king as their head of state, I think there's 13 of them in total, well, they will push for their own referenda. It's one of those things that, is it really worth it? Is it worth starting to pick at this for the sake of 500 million quid a year?
No.
When actually a lot more gets spent on, bigger things that should concern us a lot more?
Well, no, you're right in that respect. I'm just saying that is it time, I mean, after several hundred or whatever it is years, that are they really relevant to the 21st century or to would they be even relevant in the 22nd century?
Yeah, it's such a British thing, isn't it? That, a load of Brits are going, do we need this? And a load of foreigners are going, don't get rid of your royal family. It's one of the best things about Britain.
Well, all right. Well, then let the Commonwealth sell it out to the Commonwealth that the first national referendum or international referendum that the Commonwealth can decide as well as this country, and then it gives the royal family the legitimacy to keep going on, and they can shut their mouth or whatever. Me personally, I don't really give a monkeys whether they're there or not. I mean, you know, I don't like them and I don't dislike them, but
yeah.
To me, they're like sort of.
It's always funny how these things stack up, that we are talking today about the tax affairs of one family in the United Kingdom and their legitimacy, rather than talking about the automatic anointment of a new Prime Minister and what the tax affairs for all of us are likely to be. Pat, thank you so much for your call. Fully understood where you come from. I just sort of think it's one of those things that, look, I'm pretty much pro-royal family. I'm not particularly that bothered. I don't have the sort of painted plates and the silverware and the pictures on my wall, and I don't read all the gossip columns, and I don't frankly care whether Harry and Meghan come to the UK or not. But what I do think is it's sort of one of those interesting things, a bit like preserving national monuments, a bit like hanging our national flag. It's one of those elements of our historic symbolism, our cultural legacy, our quintessential unique Britishness that we have a royal family, that are the most famous family in the world. Believe you me, if the Spanish royal family or the Dutch royal family or the Luxembourgian royal family or the Japanese emperors thought that they could have the prestige and the international recognition that our royal family has, they would grab it with both hands, because it does have an important ambassadorial role on the world stage. We've seen that twice now with 2 state visits by the President of America, and indeed the state visits of our own king over to America. And how much is done behind the scenes to bind countries together, because when you have essentially these people in ambassadorial roles that are just so instantly, internationally recognisable, they really do have clout. It is a ticket that nobody can resist, whatever country they're from. It's actually, in many respects, fairly decent bang for the buck. And I just always think when you're starting to subtract things from the national mosaic of identity, be really careful of what then fills the vacuum. Because I'm fed up of having all these beatified weirdos like Greta Thunberg and George Floyd suddenly being, you know, cast as new messiahs. Because this is what happens. You take things out of the equation, something else comes in. So what on earth would Brand Britain look like without the House of Windsor? And the 2,000+ years of history that have come through this sort of genealogical line of royalty. And also, if we get rid of our royal family, you've got to remember we have an unwritten constitution. The cork is out of the bottle. Are we then going to have a president? How many executive powers are they going to have? How divisive would those elections be? Sometimes you kind of think, well, if it ain't too broke, don't fix it. OK, we're going to be taking a short break now, but a very interesting topic of conversation indeed. We're going to be back to our basics, though, after the break. We're going to be talking about some of the plans that the Labour government might have for housing migrants. Again, looking at using disused RAF bases, an announcement that was leaked out to the press before anything was said to Parliament. Shabana Mahmood, Home Secretary, calling for Mike Tapp, Immigration Minister, to be sacked by Sir Keir Starmer for being so loose-lipped about proposals. But what are they going to mean for you and I? We're going to be speaking to Tony Smith, former head of the UK Border Force, just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, look, whatever goes on, yes, we need to grow the economy. Yes, we're releasing prisoners and rapists. And yes, we've got no geopolitical positioning at all. And yes, we've got a decimated armed forces and no defence investment plan. And yes, actually, we're just a basket case of a country, like a giant dumpster fire at the moment. But still, the lead issue on the doorstep in the United Kingdom, without a doubt, is the ridiculous, farcical state of our open, porous borders, both illegal and legal migration. And Sir Keir Starmer's had the wit and the wisdom to issue a veiled warning to Andy Burnham to not lose control of immigration. Not that he's really been able to take much control of it, but at least some might say he has tried to at least posture that he is taking this seriously, smash the gangs, close the asylum hotels, etc. The big question is whether Andy Burnham is going to be taken for a ride by those radical leftist backbench Labour Party MPs who think that anyone breaking into the country should be given everything under the sun because poor vulnerable things, the horrible places they've come from. Why on earth are we not putting them up in our spare room? Apparently, though, the Labour Party, who, I don't know, has resurrected a proposal by the Conservatives to house asylum seekers on a former RAF base in Yorkshire under a plan to increase the use of military sites. Let's speak to Tony Smith, former head of the UK Border Force now. Tony, the last time we spoke, I was saying to you, I'm more, if these are disused military sites, I'm more of the position that I think it's safer and better for people to be kept in conditions that are, let's say, basic and secure, and out in the sticks rather than chucking them in houses up and down mine and your street to do what they want without any surveillance. And I was saying to you, why is it that they're allowed off these sites? And you were explaining to me that the big problem is that they aren't detention centres. So what will happen when more and more asylum seekers are put on former military bases? Are they just going to be roaming around in the green and great British countryside?
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see, Alex, if this all comes off. I mean, what I understand so far is, as I said to you before, you're right. These are not detention centres. The residents there are free to come and go. There are controls on the gate, I think. There will be orders to check whether somebody's disappeared or not, but that's not quite the same as a secure detention facility, an immigration detention facility where they're not allowed to go into the community. So I think, you know, this is a move that's been supported, I think, a number of times as instead of HMOs, Alex, or instead of hotels. I mean, hotels are down about 35%. 63% from the high. So they are moving them out of hotels. But I think, you know, as you say, compared with HMOs, this is probably a better choice. But you're still going to get objections, of course, from local communities when, you know, these sites are opened and they're worried, obviously, about their safety. If we've got undocumented migrants, you know, we don't really know who they are, who are actually free to come and go. But I mean, I think it's a step in the right direction by the government, but it's probably not quite as far as many people would like to see.
It's amazing how many NIMBYs suddenly pop up in the Be Kind movements. I think the Liberal Democrat MP near Bicester has been getting a little bit upset about the idea that an Oxfordshire site might be used. How very convenient. They all love the immigrants, don't they, when it's not their constituency. How many people are now in HMOs? My understanding is the proportion of so-called asylum seekers now being housed in random streets up and down, you know, houses up and down random streets across Britain is now the highest proportion of accommodation for so-called asylum seekers.
Yeah, I haven't got those figures. I do know that, as I say, asylum hotel use is down 35% in the last year and 63% from September 2023. But we also know that not very many asylum seekers are being removed, so they have to go somewhere. So my hunch is, Alex, that there are more in HMOs than we've ever seen before, and I suspect this is the next stage of that. Asylum claims are down 12%. Decision-making up 32%, and support costs down 15%. So everything's kind of shifting in the right direction, I think, for the government. But for me, as I've said to you before, we need a removals deterrent, I think, for the boat arrivals. To be fair to them, they are removing more people than, for a long, long time, 70,000 removals. There are more enforcement ops going on, but the actual boat removals are still pretty low, only about 4 or 5%. What we really need to do is have, I think, that removals deterrent. Remember, Keir Starmer came in. I remember watching him, Alex, come in before they were elected, saying straight away on the cliffs of Dover, I'm going to abolish the Rwanda plan as a gimmick. You know, it's not going to work. We're going to smash the gangs. And he is a human rights lawyer. It's actually the human rights legal profession that has largely trumped border control in recent years. It's the extension of human rights. So it's the legal framework that disempowers immigration enforcement and the border force from detaining and removing people swiftly. And the Rwanda plan simply didn't go far enough because of those objections in the courts and the ECHR, as you know.
Well,
So
what's
I would
interesting
like to see
now,
more of that, you know.
Yeah, what's interesting now, of course, Andy Burnham, big fan of cozying back up to Brussels, is the EU have passed their own asylum and immigration plan, which seems to start suggesting that using third countries for processing could be rolled out across Europe, and it might come to pass that Sir Keir Starmer looked to be the gimmick himself when he decided to abolish the Rwanda scheme.
Yeah, I just back from Lisbon. I chaired a border management conference out there. A lot of EU countries there, Frontex were there. They are lurching to the right in the EU, without any doubt. They are moving towards more removal strategy. They've not done that, in my experience, in the past. They are looking for deals with countries that would never have been spoken to in the past, like Afghanistan, to return people there. There's quite a lot going on in the EU, and intake into the EU is about 10% of it was in 2016, Alex. So they are tightening up the EU borders quite a lot from what I'm seeing. And as you say, this offshoring, it's slightly different. The offshoring and the outsourcing model are slightly different, Alex. Just to be clear, they're talking about removing people that have already been through the asylum process and placing them in third countries. What we were going to do under Rwanda was move them directly to Rwanda, and they could pursue their asylum claims there, which is slightly different. But nonetheless, you're right in that we are seeing a number of countries in Europe moving to the right on removals. And although we are doing more removals in this country under this government, we're not really removing the boat people. Now, I do know Andy Burnham. I met him when I worked in the Home Office, and I must say he was part of the Blair government that were really tough on immigration. They trebled the Home Office budget. They had massive increases in enforcement resources. I think his bigger challenge is going to tackle the policy and the legal obstacles, Alex. And can we get to a situation where people come off a small boat, are detained, and then are removed somewhere? I think that's the key that I haven't seen that's going to really unlock this door at the moment.
Oh, decades in the making. The first person who actually manages to do that will easily win the next election. I want to talk to you about this. As someone who was former head of UK Border Force, some of the public health risks of people coming from tropical countries or countries with worse health and hygiene records than our own, and the sorts of novel infections or diseases and so forth, and medical conditions that we once thought we had conquered and eliminated in this country, being brought to our shores. And this is because there's a story today of an asylum seeker living in a hotel in Essex testing positive for tuberculosis. Now, I know that in some parts of the world, certain regimes have banned things like vaccines, which we have used for a long time now to eradicate diseases and conditions such as polio, such as TB. We have seen a wave of young people infected with bacterial meningitis, a more deadly but rarer form of that disease. Now, nobody is saying that patient zero was an asylum seeker. But we do have people coming from countries which have deadly conditions that are not endemic to our own nation, such as MERS, such as Ebola. How much of a risk are we taking when undocumented people are coming from the Sahel, from sub-Saharan Africa, where they've got their own slate of medical issues, and potentially introducing some of those more rare conditions within our own population?
Yeah, so I did work under the previous government on the small boats and actually went down to Manston and Dover to see them being processed. And the first people they're going to see, or one of the first people, is going to be a medical professional who would at least ensure their safety and welfare. There are medical facilities on site and available at Manston. We have them at all of our ports of entry, port health facilities, where we will check, for health issues. So it's not quite as big a problem as it might be, in that it's not that there is no screening going on, Alex. There is health screening going on. On the other hand, we don't routinely x-ray everybody for TB. We used to do that when I was an immigration officer back in the day. We don't routinely do those tests. So I suppose there's always a risk when somebody has been through the initial process, something is not detected at the border, and that emerges later on, that we will have to ensure that they get the appropriate medical care. But I have to say that in the overall scheme of things and the things we talk about, Alex, I don't think this is a top issue.
And finally, here's a remarkable story that the Polish government is allegedly telling its citizens to cash in on British benefits before returning home. This is advice published on Poverty, which is a Polish government website for citizens living abroad who are wishing to repatriate. And it's saying, look, if you want to leave the UK, consider whether you're eligible for job seekers allowance, because our post-Brexit arrangements allow EU citizens who have acquired settled status before December 2020 to transfer benefits payments abroad when they move to an EU country for up to 3 months. I mean, every time you find these little loopholes, these little areas that have not been closed off, you realise how farcical our system is.
Yeah, we have to have a close look at asylum support, benefits, support for migrants, Alex. All of that stuff, Shabana Mahmood has said she is going to investigate all of these things. Whether she is able to do that, as you said at the top of this interview, in terms of politically, how far is the new government under Burnham going to go into all this? But it is true that we do offer incentives to people under the settlement scheme on the basis that they're going to stay here, Alex, not on the basis that they're going to go back to their own EU country and draw down our benefits. So I do think that's something that we need to look at, as well as the whole asylum support budget and circumstances where she has said that we will stop asylum support altogether for people who are non-compliant. I've never heard that said before by any previous Home Secretary. But again, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. Let's just see what comes out over the next few weeks and how far they actually go with all of this.
It'll be very interesting to see what Burnhamism looks like and whether Shabana Mahmood will keep that position. Tony, thank you ever so much. It's always an honour and a privilege to have a man of your expertise and standing come and explain all of this stuff to us. OK, we're going to be taking a short break, but before I do, let's do our housekeeping, shall we? These are the numbers that you need to know if you want to get in touch with the show. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Normal network rate. The glorious Kieran is poised, giggling in the gallery there. I'm watching you, Kieran. I can see you through the glass, not paying attention. What are you smirking at? Get back to work. Give him a call. Make him do his job. 0344 499 1000. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send a text message. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you type the body of your text. OK, we're taking a short break now. When we come back, we're talking about, here they go, the poor blimmin' farmers are being hammered yet again. I don't know why we seem to think that food security and, I don't know, fecund fields is a bad thing in 2026, especially when we can see what goes on in places like the Strait of Hormuz and international shipping cargo. No, the EU now wants to punish British farmers in their reset talks with Andy Burnham, as Brussels is playing hardball over the sale of UK crops using pesticides banned in the bloc. Honestly, time to get out the muck spreaders, I think, and drive them to Parliament like they did in Brussels. We're going to be discussing that with James Wright, who's a farmer and agri-tech entrepreneur, just after this.
I think if Andy Burnham wants to introduce major changes to our constitution, he's talked about overhauling the House of Lords. He's also talked about overhauling our electoral system, bringing in some form of PR, moving along devolution, giving more power to municipal mayors like he still is. I think if he wants to do any of those things, he needs a mandate from the public to do them. To try and do them without calling an election, I think would be a constitutional outrage.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Why is it that our farmers are constantly getting it in the neck? Why is it that we left the EU and we were supposed to be coming out of our own ways of doing things and protecting our green spaces and our arable land and our agricultural sector? Of course, the leftists in Labour know nothing about the countryside, don't care, hate it, all that green stuff, clearly racist. But it seems now we're cozying up to Brussels again, and Andy Burnham seems to want to continue with the Brexit reset agenda of Sir Keir Starmer, possibly going even further. But what we have learned now is the EU's very restrictive trading conditions could have a huge impact on our British farmers, particularly when it comes to the use of pesticides. Let's speak now to James Wright, farmer and agri-tech entrepreneur. On the surface of it, people go, well, you know, all of these sort of horrible pesticides that are killing bumblebees and, you know, go into the food ecosystem. Oh, it's not very good. Why should we use those things? What a great move by the EU. But does that mean we're essentially having plagues of locusts destroying viable crops? Where should we be protecting farmers when it comes to this issue?
Well, look, food security is national security, and what we need is profitable, productive farms that are encouraged and supported to produce the nation's food. This deal is about levelling the playing field between Britain and the EU, but what that really means is British farmers playing by the EU's rules. Now, we left the EU and we've been able to do all sorts of things like our precision breeding bill, so we're able to do genetically improved crops, which should all be banned if we went back into this. So actually what farmers need is a long-term arrangement where we know the rules, and the rules keep on changing. That's the big thing with this. Labour are coming back with another rules change, which is just going to make us weaker as a country.
Would you say that, on the whole, Brexit was a good thing for farming? Because there was very split on whether or not, you know, receiving EU agricultural subsidies was actually necessary when supermarkets are constantly trying to force farmers to sell produce for lower than the cost of production. Were we on the right track by getting out and coming up with our own system?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any farmer in the country that wants to be beholden to the government or the EU for their income. And when we were in the EU, a third of our income came from subsidies. And those subsidies had to work for French farmers as much as it did German farmers and British farmers. We couldn't set our own rules. We've got a new scheme. It's called the Sustainable Farming Incentive. And it means we now get paid for the things that we actually do for the environment. I've got loads of purple lays on my farm, which I'm being paid for. And actually, our prices have increased. Beef prices almost the highest it's ever been. Lamb is gone significantly higher, as has the problem here is our arable crops, which have been hammered. But they've been hammered because we're importing food that's produced to lower standards than we have. So the chemicals which are banned in the UK, we're importing crops where they are not banned, and that's what farmers want to see. They want to see if it can be imported here, it should be able to be legal to be produced here as well.
So on the surface of it, actually banning the pesticides is probably a good thing, but it's not particularly fair when consumers are going out and buying things far cheaper because other countries still get to use them.
I mean, fundamentally, the government has to decide, does it want our farmers to be beholden to high standards, in which case imports should be beholden to those same standards, or does it want a free-for-all? Now, I think British farmers want to produce food in a healthy way that supports the environment, that supports the people who eat it. And what they don't want to do is having lots and lots of rule changes like we're having at the moment. So they need to make up their mind and then back the farmers that back Britain. At the moment, these constant rule changes are just confusing, and it hurts the businesses that we are trying to support.
How difficult is this season going to be with our current weather conditions? Are farmers bracing themselves for potential drought, for unpredictable harvests?
Well, I mean, we've had the 2 hottest days in the year on record. I've been out bringing in my silage, and we're just putting muck out. You know, I think we're used to these high temperatures. Farmers are very adaptable, but what we need is long-term investment. That's not from the government. We need the confidence to be able to make those long-term investments in things like water storage. In places like East Anglia, where they do lots of irrigation, they need the confidence to be able to spend those many millions of pounds to be able to build that. And right now, we don't have that long-term confidence. Everything keeps on changing. But we're farmers. We will make it work because no one else is going to.
And what about the dialogue over things like inheritance tax? Because that seems to have dropped off the front pages. The demonstrations have now ceased. Have we had any movement in that regard?
Yeah, so just before Christmas, Keir Starmer agreed to double the limit, and that for the majority of farmers will mean that they are not having to pay inheritance tax. But it does mean our largest, most productive farms, the ones that produce the most food, that are the best at doing it, they will. And the fundamentals have not changed, which is the rate at which inheritance tax is paid far exceeds the profit that farm makes in its lifetime. So I think there is more to be done. I'm pleased that some of the political parties are still saying they'll reverse this if they come through. But what we need right now is a long-term plan for agriculture, because you know the consumer wants food available at a price they can afford, and to do that, farmers need to have the confidence to invest. And that this Andy Burnham is coming in, same old Labour. We're going to get more taxes to pay for more welfare, and that is just going to drag businesses, which is fundamentally what a farm is, a business at the end of the day, down with everything else, and it is just so disappointing.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, James. I'm a huge advocate and supporter of our agricultural industry. I'm lucky enough to live in a part of the world where I'm surrounded by fields and tractors, and it is heavenly. But they work blimmin' hard. They toil when the rest of us are putting our feet up. They're up before your alarm clock even knows that it's an alarm clock. And I think that my one thing is we should always try and buy local. Buy fresh. If you've got a farmer's market, go to it. Farm shops are springing up everywhere. Even if you're in an urban area, you don't tend to have to go very far anymore before you can find somewhere very lovely to get hold of some brilliant local produce. And we have some of the greatest on earth. So if you're going to do anything this weekend, go and find a farmer's market. Get the good stuff. Right. OK, before we go to break, let's do some messages. And let me remind you of all of the details should you wish to get in touch with the show. 0344 499 1000 is the number to both call and to send a WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to text. Natasha says, I can't stand King Charles, and I think the monarchy has been hijacked by woke diversity. However, the monarchy represents our culture and heritage, and without it, we lose our ancient and great identity, which is perilly close to being lost. Pretty much agree with every word you say there. Although I quite like King Charles. I just don't think he sells himself very well. The more I learn about him, the more I think he's kind of cool. Yes, he's a bit leftist and all that, but I kind of like the fact he walks around in, like, patched up shoes and knackered barber jackets and talks to plants. It's kind of cute. Sorry, it's when I hear my king, the head of our Christian church in this country, extolling the virtues of Islam and celebrating Islam, then he's not my king and he's not worthy to hold that title. Charles is woke. He was a clown figure when he was simply Prince Charles and spent his time talking to trees. I like the tree talking. He has not changed. I don't like the Islam promotion, though. I'm with you. He is defender of the faith, not defender of all faiths. And I think it's about time we started to be a little bit more assertive and a little bit more confident in what our own culture, our own morals, our own message, our own legacy and our own traditions look like, because that's right there is the glue of assimilation. You can't say to people randomly turning up in the UK, integrate, unless you show them what they're integrating into. So like I keep saying, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now, but don't go anywhere because there's still a lot more to discuss in the final hour of the show. I'm back just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. 2 hours down and just want to go, and that was an accidental rhyme, but hey, I've got the time. I'm just inventing it from the top of my head. Right now, I wish I was dead. That was embarrassing. I'm turning red. I studied poetry at university. You should see my fiddly over the course of the last week. Do you ever get the impression that we in the UK have just become so desensitised to things that really we should be outraged by? The constant changing of the Prime Minister. It's like, oh, here we go. Here's another one. Do we need an election? Nah, what's the point? The muscularity of the system is as such. It's like wearing a pair of jeans that you haven't washed in a decade. It just stands up by itself. Don't even need to put any legs in it. Doesn't even matter who's in number 10. Whitehall, the deep state, the NGOs, the leftist lawyers, the quangocracy. They'll just be running things from the sidelines anyway. You could probably, a bit like when we had the pretty farcical situation where there was absolutely no government in Northern Ireland for the best part of 2 years and it just happily operated itself. Probably just do that. Give up on politics altogether. Wouldn't give me much to talk about. But it does seem to me we're probably not going to get a general election. Although, here's my prediction, OK? The things you need to look out for. You need to look out for the acts going through Parliament and what are detailed in those acts, because there's some sort of English devolution act. But part of this is talking about the plebiscite and who actually gets to take part in suffrage, if you will. And it'd be interesting, right? Keep your eyes open for whether or not the Labour Party under Andy Burnham suddenly pushes really hard on proportional representation, vote for 16-year-olds, whatever it may be. Oh, giving the vote to all these randos who've turned up in the country yesterday. Of course, they deserve to decide who the Prime Minister is, as well as the people of Makerfield. But, you know, political parties are cynical things. They don't necessarily sit there going, what is in the best interest of the country? They sit there and think, how can we stay in power the longest? In fact, if they actually did think about what was in the best interest of the country and acted a little bit more as though that was the priority, they would find they did get to stick around a lot longer. But alas, we've just got pantomime politics now in the United Kingdom, quite clearly. Let's speak now to Alex Wilson, who's Reform UK's London Assembly member. Great to have you back on the programme, Alex. Immediate general election. Andy Burnham banged on about it a lot on social media. In fact, you don't have to go far to find some of the people who are now gaggling around Burnham looking to be in his cabinet, chastising the Conservative government for changes of leadership, therefore Prime Minister, without there being any sort of democratic mandate.
Absolutely. And it's not just Andy Burnham who tweeted that we need a general election now when there was changes of Prime Minister during the last government. It was Angela Rayner saying things like, you know, the Tories have crowned Rishi Sunak without him saying a word about what he would do as PM. He has no mandate, no answers, no ideas. Nobody voted for this. The public deserve their say on Britain's future through a general election. She was absolutely right then, and if they were saying it now, they'd be absolutely right now, because Burnham has no mandate. He wasn't elected as an MP in 2024 at the same time as the Labour government was elected with that big majority. He's come in from outside, and you know, if that's how the Labour Party wishes to arrange its own affairs, then that's up to them. But ultimately, the people of this country deserve to have a say. You know, we've had sets of local elections where the Labour Party and the Conservatives have been absolutely hammered over the last 2 years. It's time to give people an opportunity to vote for something different. I would say that, wouldn't I? Because obviously Reform are leading in the polls, but I think it goes deeper than that. It's about really re-establishing that connection between the governed and the governing. And at the moment, that connection is utterly broken. That's why we think we do need a general election now.
But, I mean, is Reform ready for this? Yes, having a general election, great. Reform is leading in the polls. What a perfect opportune time for the party to either, one would suggest, take power or be part of a coalition in cabinet, or indeed be leaders of the opposition. Basically, it's in many respects win-win for brand Reform UK. But would that be win-win for the country? Because as far as I can tell, you've got half a shadow cabinet, a handful of MPs, not really much experience to form a government, and I've got no idea where your policy making's at.
Well, we're in the process of broadening the party, broadening that front bench. You know, we do have spokesmen on some of the key issues, not everything yet, but that is coming in due course.
You've got no one shadowing foreign, you've got no one shadowing defence. These are massive topics.
Yeah, and they will be filled. Of course they will, because it's important that we have a broader spectrum of people representing the party. But that process has already begun. The policy work going on with Danny Kruger and James Orr and people like that, getting ready for government, that's really, really important work that's going on behind the scenes, and we'll see more of the fruits of that coming out over the summer, I'm sure. But we're getting ready for an election because we're calling for one. We wouldn't be calling for one if we didn't think we could win it. And
I'm not under any doubt that you're calling for one because you think your odds are looking pretty good. Over 300 successive polls now put Reform in the lead with by a margin. Not enough, it seems, at the moment to form a majority government. So you might need to get your house in order and figure out who you might want to hold hands with. My question isn't your readiness when it comes to your popularity in polling. My question is, given that you're leading in the polls, what on earth are we electing in? You've only been around 2 years. Where's the experience? Where's the depth? Where's the breadth? Where's the knowledge? Because, this is running a country that's in dire straits at the 11th hour, not just turning up, popping some bottles of champagne on the Friday after election night and feeling really smug.
You're absolutely right, because that's exactly what Labour did. They had their Ming Vase strategy. They didn't want to scare the horses. They didn't really set out exactly what they were going to do. And then lo and behold, they win a majority. Oh, God, what do we do now? And you're absolutely right. In order to maintain the trust and confidence of the British people, we simply cannot afford to go down that same route. But that's why we're doing the work under the bonnet at the moment, the policy work, the preparing for government team that's led by Danny Kruger. All that stuff is getting us in the position. So, yes, we're ready for the election itself, but you're absolutely right. We have to be ready for what happens after the election. We've just in the process of vetting our first batch of parliamentary candidates. They're going to be going on to do parliamentary assessment days very, very shortly. So hopefully have a decent number of candidates in place before the other parties can do the same. And, ready for the election, ready for government. It's so important that we get this right. That's what we're working to do.
Let's talk now about Danny Kruger, who has been speaking at ARC conference, calling for constitutional rebalancing, a peaceful revolution, and he's calling the party's plans an act of restoration, and saying we're not fighting immigrants, we're fighting mass migration and the surrender of our borders, and the unasked for transformation of our towns and cities. We're not fighting trans people, but the doctrine of personal self-creation. We're not fighting Muslims, but the version of Islam that recognises no allegiance to the king in part. It all sounds very Tory, doesn't it?
Not at all. It's about this kind of existential battle of ideas and battle for the soul of the country, but it's about ideas and principles and values. It's not about necessarily people as such that are kind of on the receiving end of that. But it's part of that really important work that Danny and others are doing about getting, respecting and reflecting our heritage, our cultural background as a country, Judeo-Christian values and so on, and restoring a sense of pride and civic joy and duty in our country, because that's how we can go forward. So we've had a period where politics has been very tense, very divisive, very bitter, and it's about trying to bring things back together, but rooting it in what makes us strong and has historically made us very, very strong as a country.
Let's talk now about this story, which is the Polish government website Poverty, which is there for Polish citizens wishing to return home, is urging people who have been given acquired settled status before December 2020, of course, when we Brexited, and then had to do something about those EU residents who are living and working over here. They all got the opportunity to stay. And this Polish website is saying, look, if you want to come home, make sure you bring English benefits with you. What do you make of that?
Well, it's disappointing, but it's not surprising, is it? We have become, effectively the food bank for the world, and in all sorts of ways, people coming here claiming benefits that they really shouldn't be entitled to if you're not UK-born, and taking advantage of the British taxpayers' generosity, whether it's through this aspect of the welfare system or whether it's through the small boats and the hotels and all the associated things with that. It's a real kind of indictment and failure of both Conservative and Labour governments to put British taxpayers first and deliver value for money for British taxpayers, get our economy moving, and not just being there to to give handouts to all and sundry from wherever in the world they wish to come from and take advantage.
Let's talk now about apparently government proposals that promise to give prominence to trusted news outlets on social media. Now, there's one cohort of people saying, look, this is because they want to control what we receive, what people are saying. They want to be in charge of the narrative, and if this will, give them the opportunity for their mates in the establishment to push a leftist agenda. other people have said it's not about that. It's about the fact that journalism is a profession, that there needs to be guardrails around the way that journalism is conducted, that you can't just buy a camera and suddenly decide that that's it. You are going to be the transit routes between what's going on in the world and the general public without any checks and balances. I want to know where reform would largely stand on this. The Shadow Culture Secretary, Nigel Huddleston, of course, who is a Conservative, said that these proposals could lead to biased outcomes and question how it would be decided which publishers were trustworthy. In general, is this a good idea? Is this safeguarding journalistic standards in the face of there being a lot of disinformation with citizen journalism? Or is this actually the left wing trying to maintain its control over the establishment?
Well, I think the fundamental question is over who gets to decide what is a trustworthy source and what isn't. And if it's somebody acting on behalf of the government, then that's very, very chilling indeed. Chimes with a lot of the kind of broader authoritarian kind of thrust of this government, things like the Online Safety Act, things like digital ID, the social media ban for under 16s and the curfews for 16 to 17-year-olds, who are supposedly old enough to vote but not old enough to read information on social media after a certain time that would help inform their decisions. It's very, very chilling indeed. And if it's sources like the BBC that are being promoted through this, then you only have to remember they deliberately doctored that video of Trump and were found out for that. Their coverage of things like the conflict in Gaza has been very, very suspect. Their coverage of things like trans issues, Brexit, all these big kind of contentious issues. You cannot trust the BBC to be completely neutral and unbiased on these things. Therefore, the idea that them or Sky or ITV or Channel 4 should be put forward as being the arbiters of truth, I think is distinctly worrying. Yes, there is a lot of other kind of disinformation and contested information on social media, but I think most people have got the sense to understand what they're seeing, where it's coming from, look at things in the round. Everybody needs, I think, if you want to form a balanced judgment, you need to have a balanced, broad set of views and inputs going into that. Some kind of government-sponsored scheme to put forward certain preferred broadcasters as the arbiter of truth. That's not the way to do it.
I mean, what I would say, though, is in the independent space, so to speak, the right-wingery Twitterverse and on YouTube, they don't seem to be a big fan of reform. They think you've gone way too establishment.
Well, they'd be wrong in that, but it's good to have the challenge, and everybody in politics needs to be robustly challenged and held to account, and we're no different, and that can come from both left and right. But we're working hard to put forward a broad policy platform in time for the next general election, whether that's in 2028, 29, or whether it's as early as next year or possibly even the autumn this year. We welcome the discussion, we welcome the scrutiny, but ultimately it's about doing what we're doing to put forward our position, resonate with the British public. We're doing that week in, week out in by-elections, won another 7 seats yesterday in council by-elections up and down the country, places like St Helens and Tamworth, one in Wales, and Cambridgeshire. We held a seat there that we were defending. It's good news all round for the party. We're working hard. Keep doing what we're doing, and let's see where it leads.
Let's talk about this story now, which is the Labour Party are next going to be releasing waves of killers and rapists from prisons early. We know that we've got a strained prison estate. We know that we cannot accommodate people, and it's creating a massive backlog throughout the judicial system. What would reform do to tackle this crisis?
I think the first thing that we would do, and the first thing that this government really ought to do if it was serious about tackling prisoner overcrowding, is deport the 11,000 foreign prisoners that are in our prison. That equates to about 12% of the prison population. I know this scheme that they're launching today is talking about sort of 6,000 or so prisoners that were released early. Well, if there's 11,000 foreign prisoners, you can not release those, deport those, and then you've got the space to hold on to these people who otherwise would be going out after half of their sentence. My biggest fear about this, though, is about the safety of the public. If these prisoners, these violent criminals, if they are released early, there are people who are going to be attacked, robbed, mugged, possibly killed, raped, who would otherwise have not been if these criminals were still behind bars. And ultimately, the first duty of any government is to protect its citizens from threats from outside and threats from within. Releasing violent criminals early is a really, really terrible way of doing that, especially when, say, you can free up some space by deporting the foreign prisoners who shouldn't be here in the first place.
Alex Wilson, Reform UK's London Assembly member, thank you ever so much for joining us today. Now, keep your thoughts coming in on everything that we have been talking about. I want to take some calls as well. So this is the number that you need to know, 0344 499 1000. It is your normal network rate, so it doesn't cost you any more money than, I don't know, phoning your wife or your husband or your boss and making an excuse while you're sitting in the sun garden on this very hot day. Sun garden? Sitting in the sun in your garden on this hot day and not behind a desk. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you write your message. OK, going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. I'll see you on the other side.
Somebody like Rachel. I think if Andy Burnham wanted to introduce major changes to our constitution, he's talked about overhauling the House of Lords. He's also talked about overhauling our electoral system, bringing in some form of PR, moving along devolution, giving more power to municipal mayors like he was, like he still is. I think if he wants to do any of those things, he needs a mandate from the public to do them. To try and do them without calling an election, I think, would be a constitutional outrage.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. And let's do calls, let's do messages, because I feel like I want to just, chill out a little bit now. I've worked hard for the last 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's now time for you to do some heavy lifting. Shall we have some good old regulars on? Some of my faves. Let's speak to Grace, who's in London. Good afternoon, Grace.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing, my love? What is on your mind today?
Many things. I'm very blessed, thank you. I hope you're okay and coping with this weather.
Love it. No complaints coming from me. I'm a creature of the sun.
Good for you. I'm certainly not, but I think we're very fortunate to have freezers and things like that. Really interesting things at various points in the programme so far about Christian values and things like that. And it's definitely the case that a lot of the values that we hold as normative in Britain are derived ultimately from Jesus' teaching. And it's really easy for people to not realise that because we're so used to some of those values. There's a book, for instance, called The Air We Breathe, which is about how if you travel to Australia and then you stay there a while, you get really used to the sweet taste in the air from the gum trees. But when you've not been there and then you just arrive, you notice it. And similarly, we don't necessarily notice things like the fact that we should care for the vulnerable and we should not just hurt people because we're so used to those ideas in our culture, but they only got here really mostly through Jesus' teachings historically, as you know and have said often. But we, at the same time, following on from Danny Kruger's speech, shouldn't think that Christianity is just about values. I think some people sometimes presume that it's just kind of like about values or traditions, but as you know very well, it's ultimately about real historical events and personally choosing, and each person gets to make that choice themselves, whether to follow Christ. So you can't kind of just have the values and call it Christianity. I heard one caller referencing tax and then Christianity, but Christianity is definitely not about opposing
render
tax,
unto Caesar and all the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know, it is true. There's the brilliant book, of course, by Tom Holland called Dominion, which actually spells out very clearly the influence that Christendom has had on the whole world. I think it's something... In fact, I looked it up the other day, so I know it is this. The estimates for how many innovations and world-changing discoveries have come out of Christendom is 95%. Whether you're looking at a huge amount from the United Kingdom, of course, electricity, the discovery of gravity, vaccines, the steam engine, the internet, computers, the list goes on and on and on. Christianity has created the perfect conditions for such innovation and for such discovery. So it's not just in terms of democracy and cultural values that not just the United Kingdom but the whole world should be grateful for what this particular culture has enabled and how radical a change it has been over the past 2 centuries. Always love talking to you, Grace, a fellow Christian, and well, like I always say, Sunday in a couple of days' time, you know where to go. There's no place like it. Let's speak now to Georgina. Hello, Georgina. How are you doing, my darling?
Hello, my darling. I'm fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm very, very well. I've got a smile on my face. It's sunny outside, and I know that the world feels a bit like a dumpster fire, but at least when that big ball of glowing orange is in the sky, it gives me great cheer.
Well, you look beautiful, darling. I wanted to say that I think that this government and prior governments before us have forgotten who their boss actually is, Alex. And when your employee breaks every promise in their manifesto, pathologically lies to you, gaslights you, and is a hater of all things that this country was built on and stands for, and then tries to wedge a new Prime Minister in without any democratic vote, a man who won't answer questions, a man with no manifesto, a man who's made a holy hash of being the Mayor of Manchester, a man who doesn't even know what he believes in, then this is the time to call for a general election. I mean, this country and our economy can't withstand any more time under a Labour government. We've been forced to stand aside, Alex, whilst Labour have decimated our country, our culture, our population and our economy. And even now, the stupid idiots are still patting themselves on the back at what a fabulous job they've done. I think now is the time for the people to make themselves heard, Alex, and oust the lot of them out of power.
Look, I tend to agree. I am fed up with feeling like I'm constantly a passenger in this so-called democracy, as if I don't matter, as if you don't matter, as if, you know, it's an afterthought whether or not the public should be consulted before we change the Prime Minister. And I know we don't live in a presidential system. And yet the ill-discipline, the sort of narcissism of politics that came to a fore after 2016, when all of a sudden, you know, those jumped-up little nobodies on green benches were running around studios trying to reverse Brexit, taking their little protests and marches out, arguing against proroguing Parliament, getting lawyers involved. That complete lack of message discipline, of hierarchy. I'm sorry, but if we're going to go down the line of, well, it doesn't matter if MPs want to change who's the Prime Minister, at least it should blimmin' well matter that they deliver a manifesto, that they then stick to the manifesto, because they can't have it all one way. They can't say, well, we're going to do things differently now. It's Burnhamism, not Starmerism, but we're not going to have a vote on it because we live in party democracy. And the Labour government were elected on a mandate, despite the fact that not saying anything about what their policies really were in the run-up to a general election. We live in a world where we just seem to like people because they're nice, because they've got nice eyelashes, because he wears a T-shirt, because he's going to have an all-female office staff. I mean, grow up. I don't care. What I want to know is what's going to be done about the fact that our economy is going to hell in a blimmin' handcart. I want to know the radical new taxation policies that Burnham and some of his radical left-wing backers are going to force upon us. I want to know how much at the end of the month I'm going to be paying for all these random men still breaking into the country and the fact that they're now being put in army barracks and a load of them are in HMOs. Is that up my street? I want to know that. I don't care what colour your T-shirt is. I don't care about Kemi Badenoch making a funny little sassy quip about, oh, look, is Labour's first female leader. I don't care about the fact that Andy Burnham was elected as MP for Makerfield, because that's all he is, as a blimmin' cartoon-faced Andy for us. I care about the real things happening in this country that have been neglected for decades now by successive governments and successive political parties, because they all think it's some sort of reality show. They think it's a popularity contest, because what they want to see is their little mugs popping up on their own little social media timelines and how many impressions they've got and how popular they are and how many thumbs up they're getting, likey on social media. You're not a 14-year-old girl. You're a politician. Can you start acting like one? Can you start addressing the real issues facing this country? Come up with a conviction policy, come up with an agenda for delivery, and then get on with doing it. Because I'm fed up now of the constant revolving door in and out of number 10 and the tittering glasses and the plotting and the factions. Let's get serious. All right. Didn't realise I was going to do that. Oh, out one popped. OK, we are going to be taking a short break, and I'm delighted to say that just after that, we're joined in the studio by the brilliant Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector, because we've got a lot of talking to do about a lot of crime. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, if a picture paints 1,000 words, how many words does a video clip portray? We have just seen the latest release of police body-worn video from the night of Henry Novak's death. What we see, and we've already seen the footage of poor young Henry cowering on the driveway of his assailant's family's home, clearly trying to be sheltered from further attack behind that car, choking on blood as it filled up his poor young body. And the police just going, no, don't think I've been stabbed, mate, pushing him into positions which would likely have exacerbated his internal bleeding to force him into handcuffs despite pleading that he had been stabbed. Rightly, the whole world was shocked by this and the implications for the conduct of policing, particularly under the guise of this constant fear of being called racist. Well, what makes this even more poignant is the latest release of footage of police body-worn video from the night of Henry's death exposes the lies shown by Vikram Digra, saying that, you know, he had been the victim of a racial attack. But also, it backs the assertion from Henry Novak's family that Digra was not handcuffed. In fact, Mr. Digwa, was treated extremely differently to Henry Novak. In fact, it has been alleged that when he got to the police station, he wasn't handcuffed. He was asked what choice of food he'd like. May as well roll out the red carpet. Mike, we talk about two-tier policing, which is a very nice way of saying racist policing, but racist against white people. How long has stuff like this been going on for? Is this sort of softy touch because someone's not white? Is it true? Do you see, have you got evidence that on the mean streets of, say, London, a white suspect might be pushed to the floor, handcuffed, roughed up, but if they're not white, it might be more of a, oh, well, we can't do anything that might lead us to being called racist?
Well, I saw it from the time of Stephen Lawrence. The sort of left pounced on that tragic death of that boy and then utilised it to get back at the police, really, for exposing crime figures which showed, you know, young black men were committing lots of crime, particularly street robbery. And if we look back to that, even at that time, I saw a superintendent rip out a report page which said that young black men commit so many robberies. I've witnessed myself, you know, somebody was chased by police in Brixton, they jumped over a balcony and died. The chief superintendent's first question was not how the officers are, have they done the right thing, it was what colour is the person who's died, because of this panic about this. And what you see in Hampshire here is the manifestation of 2 decades of brainwashing of recruits, convincing them that the police are racist, stop and search is racist, all this. Hampshire police in particular, there was an incident with some officers making some racist comments, so they all had to undergo this racism training, or anti-racism training, which Reading University ran. And people there, the officers were saying they were frightened to speak out and say this is nonsense. And what you have here, though, is that somebody who's allegedly called somebody a nasty name and knocked a turban off is treated far worse than somebody who's alleged to have committed a murder. That's what we've come to. This is the ridiculous situation that we've come to in this country. And I noticed that Steve Watson, who Chief Constable up in Manchester, who's saying a lot of good things, he's saying that even if people don't believe there's two-tier policing in the police, they've got to accept that the public has this perception and the police have got to do something about it, because it's absolutely undermining trust and confidence in policing, which is at rock bottom.
We can actually have a little look at some of this footage. Let's do that now.
You've got your side of the story, mate. We don't know what's going on here, OK? So we need to find out, OK? Yeah, I've gone 9 for attempt murder with the gentleman that I've run through. Have we got a van at all that I can get him down to Central? Yes. OK, and we'll get it all sorted, all right? I'm not saying you've done anything, mate, but we need to find out what's happened, OK?
He's talking about that scumbag, that murderous, lying scum of the world, nasty piece of work. Oh, have we got a van for the gentleman, please? I mean, what on earth? Why? They're speaking about him like he's some sort of, you know, special foreign prince.
It's just madness. And what we've got to do, though, is be all right. The Hampshire police seems to be drip feeding this stuff over a time rather than releasing it all at once, you know, so we can almost like forget about it, I suppose. But what we can't have is that these junior officers are offered up as sacrificial lambs. I saw this in the police all the time, where young officers have done something wrong, what they've done is followed a policy set by the senior officers. This policy was not set by them. That training for the anti-racism stuff, which often means against whites, that training was not set by a PC, a sergeant. These are chief officers, assistant chief constables, deputies, and the chief constable themselves, who must be held to account for what they've done. Because what they've done as well, by going down this track of overweighing, going just totally one way, is that they are leaving behind the vast majority of the public of the United Kingdom.
It's interesting. I was reading a story the other day of a Bangladeshi migrant who's come over committing sexual offences against children, and in his sentencing, the judge points out, well, you know, he's from a culture where he seemed to think that behaviour was acceptable. And what is amazing is, you know, you're a Bangladeshi man with deeply misogynistic and, let's be fair, paedophilic attitudes, and you avoid jail because of it. But if a white person happened to say, well, perhaps it's a part of Bangladeshi culture, you could go to jail for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a madness.
I mean, what we've gone through, we should be, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Because I might go to Saudi Arabia, and I'm sure if I pulled out a can of lager and touched some women up, they wouldn't say, well, in England, you know, it's all right to have a drink of alcohol, get a bit drunk and touch women. They would not say that. They would punish me. And we need to get back to that situation where people are treated equally under the law. If you've come here, then it's about time you learn the laws, because it's not good enough.
Here's a story that we were speaking about just as you came into the studio, and it's very unclear to me what's gone on here, but interesting it is indeed. This is the case of a teenage boy. He's been cleared of murdering a 9-year-old girl after claiming he stabbed her by accident. The jury acquitted the 16-year-old. He cannot be named for legal reasons of the murder and manslaughter of Aria Thorpe, who died from a single knife wound at a house in Weston-super-Mare back in December. The jury at Bristol Crown Court cleared him after previously hearing that he had stabbed her accidentally while play fighting. The boy denied charges of murder and manslaughter and walked free from court. Jurors said he admitted holding the knife when she was wounded, but maintained that she had moved towards it while he was trying to scare her. Why is this of particular interest? I mean, we don't know any more details. Obviously, the sensitivity of the case, the age of the case. But there's certain things here which raise a lot of questions. We know he picked up the knife from the kitchen, had gone into the lounge. He was jabbing it towards her as if he was fencing.
Well, look at the law.
The knife goes into her. What I think is strange is he then gets scared and panicked. He ran to the kitchen with the knife and put it back in the sink. He didn't check if she was injured, didn't raised the alarm with neighbours, didn't ring for an ambulance, told a group of children at the local railway station he'd killed her accidentally, and it was another girl who rang the police to report what he had said. He then ran onto the train as if to try and make off, where he was arrested.
Well, I mean, what's insane about this? So the people, the listeners and viewers are clear on the law. So murder means you stabbed somebody with intent to kill them. Manslaughter means you did a really stupid thing and killed somebody. Now, in this situation, sword fighting or fencing with a kitchen knife, which is capable of going into somebody's chest for 3 inches, is a really stupid, reckless thing to do. So I cannot understand how the jury has found this character not guilty of manslaughter. They may have believed, oh, he didn't intend to kill her, he was messing around, but how it cannot be manslaughter, that death. So this child's life is utterly worthless. I think the family have said they've been sentenced to life imprisonment. It just doesn't make sense. And I just wonder what...
It's the fact that he didn't go for help. That, as a 16-year-old... Remember, of course, this government want to give 16-year-olds the right to vote.
I was a soldier at 16.
Right, there you go. And the fact that, whether you've done something by accident or purposefully or whatever, it is, at 16, if someone's been stabbed and bleeding, you don't run out of the house,
Well, in the police, doing a bunk often means guilty. People stick around if they, but running off, leaving a child with a knife wound. I mean, you must know that knife has gone in a substantial difference. That's really awful, Alex. He needs to be held to account. We need to know what's going on here. Too often, the jury trials in this country used to be really fair, judged by your peers. Now there's all sorts of insidious influences, I believe, sectarian influences we've seen in different cases. We need to get away from that. We need to get back to being judged by your peers who are fair and free.
It's interesting, actually. We do also have the sentencing of the man guilty of an attack on police officers at Manchester Airport coming up. So it'll be very interesting to see what is handed down to him. Let us talk now, though, about the Labour Party. It starts off with, well, we've just got to let a few people out of prison. They're coming towards the end of their sentences. We're running out of space on our estates, so we need to make sure that we free up capacity in their prison cells for people who are committing atrocious crimes. And we all thought to ourselves, this is not going to end well. And end well it is not, because it seems now that having decided they need to release the spigot to start letting convicts out onto our streets way in advance of the end of their custodial sentences, that this is now going to include criminals guilty of the most serious offences released just halfway through sentences. Murderers, rapists. This isn't just about public protection. It isn't just whether these people are rehabilitated and whether they pose a threat to society. This is about whether or not justice has been delivered. If you're the family of somebody who has been murdered, or the murdered person who's never going to live, breathe, see children grow up, there is little consolation in the idea that somebody goes, spends a couple of years playing on PlayStation and smoking spice, and then gets to get on with their life.
It's madness, and you can trace this back to the Tories. I mean, their failure to deal with prisons. I mean, when it gets like 95% full, you think an alarm would go off and somebody might notice, but no one seems to have done that. So no prisons were built. Now we've got the left, the Labour Party. We know the left, like through the Greens, who want to abolish prisons. The left, too often, they don't really believe in punishment. They think these prisoners are victims of society. So they've got no real will to keep them in there. So anybody who votes Labour and thinks that they'll deal with crime is being very, very foolish. And what happens here is not only you've got the victims and their, the families who are suffering through this, you've also got, for all the police's faults, you've got so many, thousands of hard-working men and women out there in the police who are chasing the bad people, locking them up. And it's like some stupid game. They're catching thieves, robbers, rapists, murderers, and they're putting them in prison. It's like some child's game where they can just escape and come back out. And so how society is breaking down. There are no consequences for even the most wicked behaviour. We know that thieves are constantly getting away with it. But rapists are getting away with it. People who do GBH, murders, manslaughters. Society is like breaking down that people who commit these most heinous crimes are serving months and a couple of years.
If they're serving anything, where are the police is my big question. My best friend sent me a video the other day. Her daughter has her first car, has treated herself, she's a newly qualified lawyer, treated herself to a little convertible. And she was parked outside her parents' house. And along comes a couple of men on a push bike with big panniers and a little cart behind it. Knife comes out, stab, 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 tear open the convertible roof, lifted everything out the boot, in the back of their little bike, cycled on. And you could see Amazon parcels. Yeah. You could see that they have been going from door to door to door to door around this part of London, a nice well-heeled part of London, just going on the rob brazenly in the middle of the daytime. There's video footage of it. They phoned up and said, he's here, he's outside the house, he's in the vehicle, can you scramble someone? He's just on a push bike, this is the address. Oh, I'm sorry, the answer was basically, no, we don't do that anymore. We'll get back to you. They said, we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. What?
Yeah,
Somebody in broad daylight is on the rob from house after house after house, brazenly, audaciously being allowed to get away with it, because where are the police?
And what I saw a video the other day, somebody put up, there's a black guy who's a street preacher, he's preaching the Bible, basically. There was, and this is at West Croydon Station, there were 5 police cars turned up to this guy with a microphone. So, and I just think it's, as I say, it's not those officers on the beat, the younger officers. It's the people directing them who are making these insane decisions. Everything. I've been dealing with the police recently. I said, look, I've invented this free thing, this database. You can have it for free. 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. There's no sense of urgency. Somebody came to me in my business and said, look, I can do something for you that will increase your profits for free times 5. I'll see you today. I'll see you the latest tomorrow morning. But there's just a slowness. It's this public sector idleness that creeps into everything. But it's the senior officers who are directing where officers go. And like I say, if you can find 4 or 5 police cars for some guy with a microphone reading the Bible, you can find somebody to come out and help your friend.
Now, you, of course, were a Met Police Detective Chief Inspector, so I don't know how much you know about the Greater Manchester Police and whether they're in rude health or not. But, of course, we now have Andy Burnham, no longer Greater Manchester Mayor, likely to become Prime Minister of this country. We don't really know what he stands for because we don't live in Manchester. We don't know how effective he has been. But one of the great criticisms has been about certain cover-ups, where there have been failures in the GMP. Cover-ups where the buck, one would say, would stop with Andy Burnham. What are your thoughts on Andy Burnham and whether or not he's going to be a man who is tough on law and order?
Well, I come from Bolton, Lancashire, I always say. They call it Greater Manchester now. But the only time my dealings with him is every time I try and get the tram to Swinton Lions Rugby League Club on a Sunday, it doesn't work. So that's my personal experience. The trams don't work. But with law and order, there has been these issues of not investigating the grooming gangs. He's been criticised for that by various victims. What he did do, though, on a positive, he appointed Stephen Watson as the Chief Constable, and the Chief Constable has made a difference. If you listen to...
He's a rather anti-woke Chief Constable, isn't he?
He says, we'll treat everybody fairly. He's the one who said, whether you recognise the two-tier police or not, the public have got this perception, so we've got to do something about it. So he does seem to be, and there are several police forces I've dealt, Hertfordshire's one of them, where the chiefs are saying, it's hard to believe, but the chief constable said, crime is their main priority. And so, amazing as that might seem, at least somebody's saying it, and you get that in Greater Manchester. But I don't know how much Andy Burnham influenced that. But what we could hope, one thing that might make a difference, if Andy Burnham does become the Prime Minister, that he brings Steve Watson to take over London, because London has got some national responsibilities as well, because Steve Watson does seem to be saying a lot of the right things.
Well, there we go. We're all going to have to live and learn in real time what Burnhamism is all about. But, you know, it's nice to be able to optimistically project onto an unknown at this stage in the game. Mike, thank you so much for coming into the studio. I don't blame you. It's nice and cool in here. You can stay if you like. Right, OK. Coming up after the break, we're going to be speaking to Jim White, who's a sports writer at The Telegraph, to get all the latest on the World Cup. It's a subject that I'm afraid I don't know much about, but that probably puts me in a very good position to ask questions, because when you don't know something, you've got to ask. That's going to be our little recap of what's going on in the World Cup and a look ahead at England's match against Panama on Saturday, just after this.
Only somebody like... I think if Andy Burnham wants to introduce major changes to our constitution, he's talked about overhauling the House of Lords. He's also talked about overhauling our electoral system, bringing in some form of PR, moving along devolution, giving more power to municipal mayors like he still is. I think if he wants to do any of those things, he needs a mandate from the public to do them. To try and do them without calling an election, I think, would be a constitutional outrage.
Only some across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, if you're not living under a rock, you've probably noticed that there is a Football World Cup taking place. And we're doing lots of fun things related to the big old wonderful world of football here in Talk Tower. So first of all, let me tell you about TalkSport, because they've teamed up with Meantime to create a lager just in time for the World Cup. It is actually called So Good. So good they named it So Good. And it can be poured from all O'Neill's pubs around the country and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. So if you are watching the action this summer or settling in for an afternoon with your mates, go on to talksport.com/so good to find your nearest pub. Drink responsibly. And also, given that the World Cup has kicked off at Talk, we are celebrating in style. We're giving you the chance to get a load of cash money in your bank, because obviously you need to buy all the So Good lager. You're going to need a little bit of an injection that's Rachel Reeves proof, which is why we're offering £26,000 in tax-free cash. So if you want to know how to enter, why wouldn't you? Watch this.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
£26,000. I wonder how many pints that would buy. Probably about 5 these days. No, so good it's also reasonably priced. Anyway, good luck if you're entering that competition. Now, talking about the main competition of them all, which is, of course, the World Cup itself. We're joined now by Jim White. I was trying to say Jim White and Sports Right, and it's becoming Jim's Right Sport Whiter. Oh, blimey, it's been almost 3 hours, so do bear with me, Jim. And do bear with me, because I actually know nothing about football, although I am partaking in the patriotism of watching the World Cup. Why were we so lacklustre against Ghana?
Oh, Alex, what were you saying? What were you saying in the previous item about Andy Burnham? Optimism is the best way forward. So let's be optimistic. Let's forget that Ghana performance. Yes, it was poor. But here's a stat for you, Alex. It means now that England can't win all their group games because they drew against Ghana. Well, interestingly, since 2002, none of the winners have won all of their group games. So you never know. It doesn't mean England are out of it. Sometimes you need a bit of a kick up the backside that a poor performance in the group stages brings. And maybe, let's be optimistic, that's what's happened with England this time, and they're going to go on from here.
Well, one would suggest that they probably don't face a stiff competition when it comes to playing Panama. I know nothing about the World Cup, but World Cup 2006, I was actually living in Ghana, and it was the first time they qualified, and they got all the way to the quarters. And I know how much energy and fan motivation powers the Black Stars on to success. So I had a feeling it wasn't going to be as sort of open and shut as people were suggesting. But when it comes to Panama, I don't know, they've only got about 5 people who live there. Surely we can beat Panama on Saturday.
Yeah, they're very good. They're very good when it comes to opening and closing a canal, though. I think it's an interesting one, this one, because if England had beaten Ghana, then I think the manager would have allowed some of the peripheral players to get a match in. He'd have played some of the reserves. I don't think he's got that luxury because he still wants to win the league. It provides a slightly easier path through the knockout stages if he does so. So I suspect what's going to happen is he will go full strength on Saturday, injuries notwithstanding.
So, I mean, I just turn up at the local pub and watch the England matches because that's about all I can seem to manage. Talk to me about what's going on with the rest of them in this competition. Who's doing better than expected? Who's doing worse than expected? When we get out of this stage of the competition and into the next tiers, who might we lose? Who might we keep? Who's shaping up and who's not?
Well, I'm afraid this is not going to go down well with your listeners north of the border, but Scotland are definitely not doing as well as everybody hoped. They're clinging on to the permutations, the possibilities that they might still somehow edge through qualification. They have to wait till Sunday to see if they're going to be one of the best 8 third-place teams who will qualify. Doesn't look like it's likely to happen. Who's doing really well? Argentina, France. Oh, these sides are absolutely magnificent. There's a sort of internal competition going on between some of the big names, individuals like Lionel Messi, like Erling Haaland, like Kylian Mbappe, who are all trying to become the leading goal scorer, and that's becoming fascinating on that front. So I think a lot of teams have started running, but it's not a sprint. Alex, I will tell you, it's a marathon. It goes on for 6 weeks, don't forget.
And looking at the likes of Argentina and France and some of the big dog countries, can we hold our own against them? Because I'm hoping we will get through, given I think some people might suggest we had an easier draw than Scotland even. But how would we shape up when it comes to playing those bigger sides? Are we, despite the sort of lacklustre performance against Ghana, are you looking at the squad and thinking, actually, we're in rude health, we're doing OK, there's potential here, we've got to sort of focus on our strategy, get it right? Or are you looking at the sort of Thomas Tuchel's more interesting selection of a squad, leaving out some of the big names and thinking, that was a gamble that might not pay off?
Reputations always go up in absentia when England don't do well. So everyone say, why didn't he pick so-and-so? Should have picked so-and-so. He'd have made a difference. Oddly and weirdly, I think England will do better as the competition advances because they won't be facing opponents who sit back against them as Ghana did, and they prefer to attack on the counter-attack. And when they're up against the big sides who have the ball and pass it around a lot, I think they have the personnel who can break them down and win it. But back to optimism there, Alex. I have nothing actual basis for that at all, apart from blind optimism.
Who's really impressing you in the England squad at the moment, and who's sort of disappointing you? Who hasn't played their best yet?
Well, I think all of them impressed me against Croatia, and then pretty much all of them rather disappointed me against Ghana. I wonder about some of the players not being quite good enough for the world stage. They say you need 5 world-class players to win the World Cup. I think we've probably got 3 at the moment, and I'm not sure that a couple of them, mentioning no names, Anthony Gordon and Noni Madueke, could ever be described as world-class.
And finally, I was reading the other day about someone being sent off. It might have been from Paraguay or playing against Paraguay for covering his mouth or something. Can you explain that rule to me? Because it's newly introduced this World Cup.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre one. It's because they think that players can utter horrible things if they have their mouth covered, and therefore it's not seen by the cameras, and they can't be then afterwards seen to be being disparaging to opponents. So that's the idea, to stop them saying nasty things, Alex.
Oh, what would football be without people saying nasty things? Jim, thank you ever so much. It's been really great to have you on, informing me of everything going on in the world of soccer. Hello, Mr. Collins.
Well, hello. How are you?
I'm well, actually. I know nothing about football. I've been watching, sort of. Basically, I've been sitting in the pub holding a pint with a screen on, and when people cheer, I go, hey, along with them.
Do you go, he's got nice legs?
Oh, I don't really find football as... They're not my cup of tea.
No, more of a table tennis girl, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. I love masculinity in its full-strength format. High testosterone.
I don't know where this is going.
No, I don't know either. Why is it with you guys and handovers? I'm asking you a question about football, and Jeremy got me on one end, and you get me on the other end.
Sorry?
Well, your brains are just... Oh, shut up.
I was going to mention about the hand on the mouth, because I only read that, like, about, I don't know, a week ago. And I thought, yeah, that's interesting, because the suggestion is you are clearly saying something, you know, a little bit.
So, what are your thoughts on...